True Fans, Scout Galley, Book 1, written and read by Jerry Hart. Part 1, Pre-Production. Chapter 1. The theater was crowded. Ricky ran into the lobby, past the swarm of people, and made her way to the doorman stand next to concession. Sean said he left her ticket there, and that she should just ask for it. When she got to the stand, she saw a young woman with short brown hair tearing tickets and directing patrons to his and her correct auditoriums. "Hi, Scout," she greeted, reading her name tag. "My boyfriend left a ticket for me. My name is Ricky." Scout smiled and retrieved the ticket from a hidden compartment in the stand. "This is a really scary movie. Are you sure you want to watch it?" Ricky laughed. "I love horror movies. I'm more worried my boyfriend will be scared and want to leave. I've been waiting 11 years to see this sequel." "Me too," Scout said excitedly. "It was totally worth the wait. I've seen it twice already." She tore her ticket and handed her the stub. Ricky ran directly ahead to the largest auditorium, feeling her cell phone vibrate in her purse. She figured it was Sean, asking where she was. Since she would see him any moment, she ignored the call. The auditorium was stadium seating. She rounded the corner of the stairs and looked up into the dim auditorium. Almost every seat was taken. She scanned the crowd until she saw a hand waving at her in the middle. She waved back and walked up the stairs just as the lights dimmed and the previews began on the screen. "Sorry I'm late," she whispered into his ear. "I got your text just as I was walking in, but I didn't check the phone." "I didn't text you," he whispered back, taking a sip of his large soda. "Called, whatever." "I didn't call you either." "Oh." She pulled her phone out and checked. She'd received a text message, and it definitely wasn't from Sean. She held the phone, her hand shaking slightly. Sean noticed and said, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, just my ex." "What does he want?" A woman in front of them turned her head and gave them the stink eye. Sean apologized to her. Ricky leaned closer to him and said, "He wants to get back together." "Good luck with that," Sean said sarcastically. Ricky had only been dating him for a month, but she really liked him. He was tall, which was a plus, and only a year younger than her 21 years. He had a good job as a mechanic and only drank on special occasions. And an even bigger plus was that he didn't smoke. Her phone vibrated again. She checked it. "Why won't you talk to me?" the message read. She turned the phone to silent and threw it in her purse. Tony, on the other hand, was not such a great guy. He was smelly, out of shape, jobless, and a habitual drug user. He hadn't started out as all those things, but had slowly degraded over the 3 years they were together. Ricky tried to get him to change his ways, but his stubborn refusal drove her to dump him and move on. "I'm going to use the bathroom," Sean said, standing up. "I would have gone earlier, but I had to save our seats." He kissed her forehead and walked down the aisle to the lighted stairs. Ricky watched him go, smiling fondly. It was way too early to think of getting serious with him, but she liked his chances. The previews ended 10 minutes later, and the movie began. Sean hadn't come back. As much as Ricky wanted to watch the sequel to her favorite movie of all time, Sean's absence worried her. And then there were the annoying texts from Tony. She felt like she had a bomb in her purse instead of a phone, and she suddenly wanted to check for more messages. She pulled the phone out and pulled up the main screen, earning another look from the disgruntled woman in front of her. Ricky ignored her as she read Tony's latest message. "Remember the movie you love where the boyfriend gets killed in the movie theater bathroom?" Ricky jumped to her feet and ran down the stairs, nearly stumbling in the dark. She ran out into the hallway and looked for the men's bathroom, her heart racing. She found the closest bathroom and ran in, ignoring the men giving her curious looks. Sean wasn't in there. She ran back out and screamed his name. The few patrons still lingering in the hall looked at her. "Sean!" she screamed again. "What?" a voice replied. She turned and saw him standing with a few ushers outside another auditorium. She saw another guy with them who didn't appear to work there. "Where have you been?" she asked Sean. "Oh shit, I'm sorry. I was chatting with these guys." He indicated the 4 guys, all wearing the same matching black shirts and holding dustbins and tiny brooms. "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing her worried expression. She waved him to come closer and then showed him her phone. Sean looked around quickly. "Is he here?" "I don't know. When I saw this, I thought he was threatening you." She looked around as well, even checking the ushers again as they continued to stare. "He must know we're here. Otherwise, he wouldn't have mentioned the movie theater bathroom." "What movie is that from?" She sighed. "It doesn't matter. Let's just go back to the movie." Sean smiled that killer smile she loved. He nodded, and they returned to the auditorium. Chapter 2. Sean followed her back to her house. It was a cute 2-story that she lived in with her parents and brother. Tony had occasionally stayed over as well. It had taken her brother to convince him to stay away after the breakup. Ricky parked in the garage while Sean parked behind her in the driveway. She looked out of the garage as the door closed noisily. She felt like she was being watched. The neighborhood was old, with the houses far apart from each other. The backyards were huge, unlike the newer houses her friends were buying. Ricky usually hated those space-saving constructions, but tonight she would have preferred her neighbors' houses to be closer. She felt alone and vulnerable now. "Are you all right?" Sean asked as he entered the house behind her. "Yeah, I'm just freaked out all of a sudden." She closed the door and locked it. Then she turned on the foyer light as well as the living room light to the left of the front door. The house was empty. Her parents and brother were at a concert in Dallas. "You don't think Tony would do anything to hurt you, do you?" Sean asked. "I don't know. He took the breakup pretty badly." "When was the last time you saw him?" he asked, going to the kitchen. "Want a beer?" he added. "Yes," she replied. "And the last time I saw him was a month ago. He looked worse than before we broke up. And he was breathing so heavily, like the simple act of walking exhausts him." She waited for a response, but got none. She stood in the foyer, waiting for Sean to return with the beers, but the kitchen directly ahead was quiet. She had never heard the refrigerator door open. "Sean?" No response. She slowly walked toward the kitchen, never taking her eyes off the dining table in the corner. She wasn't aware she was holding her breath until she let it out slowly in order to take another. "Sean?" Someone appeared directly in front of her. She screamed as she backed away. Whoever he was wearing a black hoodie and matching pants. His hood was up, but his face was clearly visible. It was pale, with rotten skin. Ricky turned and ran toward the front door. Panicking, she couldn't unlock it. She heard footsteps behind her, so she bolted upstairs without a second thought. She rounded the landing and headed up the second flight. When she got to the second floor, she waited, breathing heavily. The figure's footsteps pounded on the stairs as he rounded the landing and headed toward her. When he got to the second floor, she charged him, ramming her right shoulder into his chest. He flew backward, over the steps, and landed hard on the landing. Ricky stood at the top of the stairs and just watched. Her heart was still racing, and she could barely breathe, but she couldn't force herself to move. Who was this man? Could it be Sean? No, This guy was wearing a different outfit. Sean couldn't have changed in the kitchen that fast. The man lay against the wall on the landing, his feet on the first step. Ricky slowly stepped down, toward him. He was blocking the way to the bottom of the stairs, but if she was careful, she thought she could sneak past him. She'd seen this in so many horror movies. Once she got close enough, the man would suddenly wake up and attack her. Ricky stopped in the middle of the flight and listened. Something caught her attention, so she held her breath. Breathing. The man in front of her was breathing heavily. It was familiar. And then she realized what it was. "Oh, God," she whispered, and then covered her mouth to quiet herself. She knew the man who sat unconscious on the landing. She took a few more steps, studying his face. Now that she could see it more clearly, she realized it was a mask. The man also wore black gloves in order to cover up every bit of skin, but she knew who it was. Ricky stepped onto the landing, between his legs, and then she stepped over. She expected him to lunge at her at any moment, but he didn't. She managed to get past him and head down the first flight, toward the foyer, but she heard movement behind her. She screamed as she felt a hand grab the back of her shirt. She tried to run, but she tripped and tumbled down the rest of the stairs. Chapter 3. She woke up in a chair. The first thing she noticed was that she couldn't move. The second thing she noticed was a man sitting in front of her. It was Sean, and he was tied up with rope. Ricky looked around and noticed they were in her living room. Sean was facing her in his chair, his chin resting on his chest. She tried to scream, to wake him, but her voice was muffled. She saw a big piece of duct tape over his mouth. She must have had a piece over her mouth as well. Footsteps to her right startled her. She saw the masked man approach from the adjoining kitchen, a large knife in his hands. He twirled it around, with the sharp point poking the index finger of his left hand. Ricky screamed and shook her head. She tried to plead with him, to beg him to stop. She knew why he was doing this, and if she could only talk to him. The man stood behind Sean and wrapped an arm across his chest, like he was hugging him. Sean stirred then, slowly waking up. The masked man caressed Sean's cheek with the knife. Ricky screamed again, and this time Sean seemed to hear it. He came fully awake and stared at her with wide eyes. Then he looked down at the other man's arm. Then he looked to his left, at the masked face. The man stood to full height and plunged the knife into Sean's left shoulder. Sean screamed. Ricky screamed. The man tilted his head to the side and stared at her. When he pulled the knife out, blood squirted out of the wound. Ricky started breathing heavily through her nose and feared she would pass out or suffocate. She jumped up and down in her chair, trying to loosen the ropes. Sean slowly came to his senses and stopped screaming, but he was clearly in pain. Sweat poured off his face in buckets. Ricky couldn't believe this was happening. It had to be a nightmare. She'd wanted to see the new horror sequel so badly, had dreamed about it for 11 years. She used to fear she would die before it was even made. This was just a nightmare. It was the day before the movie was to open. She would wake up in her bed. She would go to work. Then she would meet Sean at the theater. She knew that was all a load of shit. She wasn't dreaming, and all of this was very real. She heard Sean groan, so she looked at him. He looked weaker than he had a minute ago. She shook her head in apology. This was all her fault. The masked man wrapped his arm across Sean's chest again. Then he stabbed Sean in the stomach. Ricky screamed, and then she screamed again. She continued screaming as she watched Sean being stabbed to death. She couldn't stop herself from counting the number of stabbings. She lost count at 16. By then, Sean was dead. The killer seemed to notice this, so he stopped stabbing him and shoved the chair over. Sean's head hit the floor with a sickening thud. The killer kneeled down in front of Ricky and removed the tape from her mouth. "Tony, stop," she said, tears spilling from her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" He tilted his head to the other side and then removed the zombie mask. It was Tony. "How dare you ask me that?" he said through gritted teeth. "You ruined my life when you broke up with me, and then you parade this pretty boy around town?" He indicated Sean. "You must be out of your fucking mind." "I'm sorry, Tony," she replied, carefully working her hands out of the ropes that bound them. "I made a mistake breaking up with you. I know that. I've missed you, thought about calling you, but I was too scared." "Scared of what?" His dark, sunken eyes narrowed. He had a thin mustache, and the curly hair on his head was very thin. He looked old and young at the same time. "Scared you wouldn't forgive me," she said. Of course, she was lying, as most people would do in such a situation. She didn't know if he would believe her, but she knew she had to distract him. "Really?" he asked. He sounded like he believed her. "Yes. After the mistake I made, how could you not hate me?" Her right hand slipped free. "I love you, Tony. I missed you. Now that Sean is out of the way, we can be together again." He smiled. It truly was a sweet smile, one of the things Ricky had liked about him. She didn't care for it now, though. Tony leaned forward, his eyes closed and his lips puckered. He kissed her, and as much as she didn't want to, she kissed him back. As they kissed, she reached for the knife. She'd seen it in his left hand as he took the tape off with his right. She felt the handle. Before Tony could notice, she snatched the knife out of his hand and stabbed him in the side of his face. He screamed and backed away, tripping over Sean's body. Ricky pulled at the rope across her chest until it was loose enough to slip out of. She ran into the garage and hopped into her car. She'd pressed the garage opener on the wall without even thinking about it, and by the time she had the car started, the door was halfway open. She backed out of the garage and immediately hit something. Sean's car. She'd forgotten he parked behind her. She screamed and cursed, ready to exit the car and run to a neighbor's, when she saw Tony run into the garage. Ricky put the car in first gear and stomped on the gas pedal. She rammed Tony directly into the wall in front of her. He screamed as blood shot out of his mouth. Ricky put the car in reverse and then back into first. She stomped on the pedal and rammed him again as he dropped to his knees. His head nearly exploded. She repeated the process again and again until there was nothing left of Tony's upper body. Chapter 4. Scout Galley poured the ticket stubs into a brown paper bag, stapled the bag, and then locked the doorman stand. The theater was closed, and the last few movies were almost done playing. She wanted to hurry and close her shift so she could catch the premiere of her friend's independent movie. Duke, an ex-employee, had somehow managed to convince the manager to let him screen his movie in one of the auditoriums after its movie ended. A bunch of Duke's friends were already meeting in the auditorium. The movie was to start at 12 a.m., giving Scout only 10 minutes to finish her tasks. Oh, the joys of working at a movie theater. Scout couldn't complain. She was lucky the theater was still open. With streaming services and kiosks on nearly every street, the theater business was suffering big time. There were rumors this theater would close sometime this year, but the managers denied them. Every time Scout heard these rumors, however, her heart hammered. Finding another job would be difficult. But she tried not to think about such things. She had a premiere to catch. On weekdays, she had to shut down all the projectors after the movies ended. She loathed long movies. But since it was a Saturday, the projectionist would take care of this task. As Scout took the ticket stubs upstairs, she thought about the strange incident with that pretty redhead. She'd frantically run out of her movie, looking for her boyfriend. She'd even gone into the men's bathroom, shouting his name. What was that all about? After she'd delivered the stubs to the manager in the office, she ran back downstairs to await someone. Sure enough, once she rounded the doorman's stand and headed toward the lobby, she saw Taylor standing just outside. Scout opened the door and was about to close it behind her when another girl stuck her arm through the gap. Scout, startled by her appearance, backed away to let her in. "I didn't know you were bringing Gina," Scout said to Taylor. "Of course I'm going to bring my girlfriend," Taylor replied. She was an inch shorter than Scout, with a buzz cut that she sometimes let grow out. She wore a black t-shirt and tan shorts that showed off her surprisingly thick calves. Her small white Converse made her legs look even bigger. Scout looked away. She felt the tingle of arousal, and the last thing she wanted was for Taylor or her girlfriend noticing. Gina pushed her black bangs out of her face, looking around the lobby. Taylor loved Asian girls, and Gina fit that bill. Scout liked the girl, but at the same time she was jealous of her. "The movie hasn't started, has it?" Taylor asked. "Not yet," Scout replied. "It's in Auditorium 5. Let me just relock this door." She turned and escorted them to Auditorium 5, 2 down from the largest auditorium showing the new horror sequel. She could hear the constant booms of the action movie showing in 6. None of the auditoriums were as soundproof as they should be, and she was always embarrassed when she saw movies with her friends, only to hear the sound from the movie next door. And forget trying to get a signal on a cell phone anywhere in the building. Scout, Taylor, and Gina walked into 5. The auditorium was halfway full. Scout knew less than half of the people there. In the first row were people she definitely knew. One was Duke, the director. The other was Jaron, his director of photography. "Do you want to meet the director?" Scout asked Taylor and Gina. They nodded, so she led them down the aisle. "Duke, this is my friend Taylor and her girlfriend Gina." Taylor shook Duke's hand, smiling, but Gina suddenly looked nervous at the mention of the word girlfriend. Scout didn't know if Gina was out, but at the moment she didn't care. "Nice to meet you," Duke replied, not noticing anything amiss. He was very skinny, skinnier even than Taylor, and his hair was shoulder length. He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose as he said, "I hope you enjoy my movie. We all worked very hard on it." "What's it about?" Taylor asked. "It's about a group of vampire hunters. Nothing original, but it doesn't matter as long as you do something fresh with the material." Duke rambled on, as he usually did when he talked about his work. "Cool," Taylor said. She didn't sound like she meant it, but Duke didn't seem to notice. "Nice to meet you. Good luck with the premiere." Duke thanked her as he turned back to his DP. "How's your mission to save the world going?" Scout asked Jaron. Jaron turned to her and laughed. "Fuck you. And fine. I donated blood and volunteered at an animal shelter, thank you very much." He nodded to Taylor. "About time I finally met you. Scout talks about you all the time." Scout shook her head subtly, her eyes wide in shock. Jaron noticed but didn't appear to understand. "Is that right?" Taylor asked, smiling at Scout. "Yes," Jaron went on. "It's always, Taylor said this, Taylor said that. Taylor, Taylor, Taylor." "That's great," Scout said through gritted teeth. "Now how about you shut the fuck up?" Jaron laughed for a second, but then stopped when he saw the expression on his friend's face. He looked at Taylor and Gina. The former was grinning. The latter was not. Scout turned to Taylor and laughed. He's exaggerating. I'll bet, Taylor said. We should get our seats, Gina said, not sounding the least bit amused. They went to the second row and sat right behind Duke. Scout walked up to Jaren and whispered, What the fuck, bitch? What did I do? Gina is Taylor's girlfriend. You practically just told her I'm in love with Taylor. No, I didn't. Scout shook her head. You're the worst roommate ever. You're welcome to move out. Jaren sat down and stuck his lip out. Scout laughed and sat on the other side of him. That look doesn't work on me. Sorry I accidentally told your crush you're obsessed with her. Scout looked over her shoulder. Taylor and Gina were talking to each other. Taylor had her legs crossed, and Scout couldn't help but stare. She could almost see up her shorts. Could you possibly stare any harder? Jaren asked. Scout looked at him. You noticed that? I don't know. Do you notice this? He crossed his eyes, twisted his face, and stuck his tongue out. Christ, I didn't look that obvious. Besides, I can't help it. I'm a leg girl. Why are her calves so big when the rest of her is so scrawny? I think it's because she walks a lot. She doesn't have a car. Taylor looked at Scout and waved. She does have nice calves, Jaren whispered. If she weren't so gay, I'd hit that. Scout looked at him. That's the dumbest thing you've ever said. So, Gina doesn't know you and Taylor used to fool around before they got together? Hell no. Do you think we'd be hanging out if she did? Why didn't you and Taylor go out? Scout sighed. I don't know. She says she just wants to be friends with me, and if we went out and it didn't work, the friendship would be ruined. Or some bullshit like that. She claims she's not friends with any of her exes. That's not bullshit. I'm not friends with any of mine either. Duke waved his arms to get everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. It means a lot to me. My friends and I worked very hard on this movie. It took months, and everyone pitched in for free to help make my dream a reality. There would be no movie without them. The audience clapped. Scout sat down next to Taylor. Did you help with this movie? Taylor asked. Yes, Scout replied. I told them I'd help on the next one too. Have you seen it? Not the final cut. I read the script though. It seemed interesting, though a little convoluted. Duke continued for a few minutes, answering questions from the audience, and then the projectionist started the DVD, which was hooked up to the pre-show projector. The movie started. 1 hour later, it was over. The audience sat silently for at least 10 seconds before Taylor started clapping. There were a few more scattered bits of applause, but not much. Scout looked around at the confused faces of Duke's friends and felt embarrassed for the director. Duke didn't seem to notice. He was grinning like a proud papa. Chapter 5. Everyone mingled outside the theater a few minutes later, discussing the movie. Duke said goodbye to the friends who had to leave and talked with Jaren. Scout stood in front of the box office with Taylor and Gina. That was a train wreck, Taylor whispered, looking over her shoulder at the filmmakers. It didn't seem like it was taken seriously. The whole movie felt like a joke. I guess so, Scout agreed. We were just having fun, though. Nothing wrong with that. I thought you said they were serious about being filmmakers. I did. Not with that film, though, I guess. Taylor laughed and shook her head. Well, thanks for inviting us. It was fun. She hugged Scout. We still hanging out tomorrow? Scout looked at Gina, who was looking elsewhere. She seemed to be listening in, though. Yeah, sure. Taylor and Gina walked off toward the parking lot. Jaren approached Scout. What did you think of the movie? he asked her. The cinematography was really good. Jaren stared at her. You didn't like it, did you? Scout gave a sympathetic smile. I didn't hate it. I don't think anybody liked it, but Duke is in denial. He's already working on the sequel script. Awesome, Scout said sarcastically. Are you still going to help on the next movie? I can't think of a reason not to. Jaren laughed and slapped Scout's shoulder. We're going back to Duke's friend's house for some drinks, since the bars are about to close. You coming? No, I'm beat. All right, I'll see you later. Jaren rejoined Duke. Nearly everyone was gone now. Scout walked to her car, over by the marquee, and drove down the service road to her and Jaren's apartment. She groaned when she saw the front door open. Jaren often forgot to lock it. His crazy ex-girlfriend had kicked it in a few months ago, breaking the handle. A slight breeze could blow the door open if it wasn't locked. Scout simply pushed it open and locked it behind her. Her room was on the left, near a two-way bathroom by the washing machine and dryer. She locked the door that connected with the foyer and the bathroom, and then locked her bedroom door. Whenever Jaren's friends came over and used her bathroom, they would often peek into Scout's room for no reason. Scout fixed that by keeping them from getting into the bathroom at all. She lay down on the bed, stared at her spinning ceiling fan, and tried not to think of Taylor. They had met 4 years ago, through some matchmaking service, and saw a movie. Taylor hadn't invited her into her apartment because she claimed her sister was spending the weekend and didn't want to meet her sister's girl toys. Taylor and Scout's friendship wasn't exactly a solid one, though. They often argued, with Taylor giving her the silent treatment whenever she was upset with her, which turned out to be almost all the time. A week after they first met, Taylor got a haircut and asked Scout if she liked it. Scout jokingly said no. Silence ensued for 2 whole weeks. Scout didn't know why she kept hanging out with Taylor. One or the other would apologize after their arguments, and they would go back to being friends. Deep down, Scout figured she was in love with Taylor, but she would never admit it to anyone. It wasn't like it would do any good. Taylor was with Gina. Scout's cell phone buzzed. She read the text message from Jaren, stating there were a few hot dudes at Duke's friend's house and that Scout should come over and try to get lucky. Scout laughed humorlessly and texted that she wasn't interested, maybe next time. Though she loved Jaren as a friend, his constant jokes about turning her straight were getting tiresome. Scout fell asleep watching TV and was awakened by another text from Jaren a few minutes later. He told her that a man was murdered down the street from Duke's friend's house. A woman, the victim's boyfriend, killed the murderer. Scout was too tired to care and quickly fell back asleep. Chapter 6. The next morning, Scout met Jaren and Duke for breakfast at a diner down the street. It was a weekly tradition, one Scout enjoyed when she wasn't too hungover to leave the apartment. She sat with the others at a booth in the far corner. They usually sat at the bar. Man, Duke said excitedly. Did you hear what happened? Scout had to think for a moment. About the murder? Duke nodded. There were police and ambulances everywhere. It was wild. Jaren told me a girl killed the killer, or something like that. Yeah. Dude, he had her and her boyfriend tied to chairs. The girl escaped and stabbed that motherfucker. He gestured, stabbing Scout with his butter knife. The killer was torturing the boyfriend right in front of her. How do you know all this? We were there, man. I mean, not during the murder, obviously, but when they were wheeling her out. I heard the cops talking. Jaren was stirring his ice water with a straw, barely paying attention. Scout said to him, You left the goddamn door unlocked again. He looked at her with a confused expression. Then it hit him. Oh, shit. Sorry. It's okay. Let it be a constant reminder of the crazy bitches you tend to hook up with. May you not meet another. I'll drink to that. Jaren raised his cup. Are you even listening to me? Duke piped in. There was a brutal murder near my friend's house. So? Scout said. So? Don't you think it would make a great movie? Not really, Jaren said. We don't know the details. We can do research. Seriously, I have ideas swarming through my head right now. I started a script as soon as I got home. A script? Scout asked. Based on what? Based on something recent and awful and local. Sick, right? The fact that it happened, or the fact that you're writing about it? Somebody's going to make a movie about it. I'm just getting a head start. I could have it done in time for the film festival in October. I don't think this is a good idea, Jaren told him. Duke looked at him with eyes wide. Why the hell not? It just seems heartless. This coming from the guy whose dad is in prison for murder? Scout, who had been taking a sip of Jaren's water, suddenly spit it out. I can't believe you just went there. It's all right, Jaren said. You're right, Duke. My dad murdered someone, but that doesn't mean I like the idea of killing. If I did, I would have murdered your scrawny ass years ago. Scout and Duke laughed. Jaren didn't. All right, I'll drop it. Duke raised his hands in defeat. You're not going to make the movie? Scout asked. Oh, I'm still making it. I meant I'll drop the daddy thing. Scout sighed as the waitress came over. Jaren said he wasn't hungry. Chapter 7. Around 7 that evening, Scout drove down 820 toward White Settlement. Taylor lived out in the country, but Scout didn't mind the drive. It was very scenic, with large fields and empty roads. She often listened to some indie rock during these drives. She took an exit and drove across an overpass to get to Taylor's expensive-looking apartment. Gina paid for the place because Taylor couldn't possibly afford it with her party store salary. Scout wished Taylor worked at a bookstore instead. They shared a love of books and would discuss their favorite authors for long periods of time while playing video games. Oftentimes, Scout took pleasure in simply watching her play role-playing games on her computer. She couldn't explain why she liked watching that, but it was what it was. After parking, she walked up the 3 flights to Taylor's place. When the door opened, she was met with the usual sight of Taylor in a t-shirt and pajama bottoms. Scout smelled hamburgers. You hungry? Taylor asked as she closed the door behind them. Starved? Scout followed her to the kitchen. Remember when we first met, how we used to drink boxed wine and eat that strawberry cake you always made? Taylor laughed and nodded while she cooked the hamburger meat in the frying pan. Good times. Is Gina here? No, she's out of town on business. Gina was almost always out of town, which was why Scout and Taylor hung out every weekend. Scout didn't like the thought of her friend being home alone. Well, that was one of the reasons she came over. Food's ready. Make a plate. Yes, ma'am. Scout saluted her. They ate in the living room while Taylor went through her online movie queue. In the mood for anything in particular? Not really, Scout said as she took a bite of her hamburger. Something funny. That's particular. Bitch. They laughed as Taylor selected a comedy. They ate and watched for an hour, discussing a book Taylor had recently read. Scout asked to borrow it. They spent another hour talking about random stuff. Did I get you in trouble with Gina last night? Scout finally asked. Taylor shook her head as she rocked back and forth in her recliner. Does she know you and I fooled around before you two met? You wouldn't be over here if she did. Sorry about Jaren. He has such a big mouth. He's kinda cute. Scout laughed. If you say so. You don't like guys like him? I don't like douchebags. Yeah, I guess he had a douchebag quality. Scout stared at Taylor for a moment, imagining she was going out with her rather than Gina. Scout often joked about being too selfish to be in a relationship. She hadn't been in one yet, in fact, but she truly could imagine being with Taylor. Why are you staring at me? Taylor asked. No reason. Want to watch something else? I guess. Taylor selected another comedy. Did you hear about the murder last night? Scout asked. Taylor looked at her suddenly. No, where? Near Duke's friend's house. It was after the premiere. He said a guy and girl were attacked, and that the guy was killed. The girl killed the killer. And guess what else? What? She was at the theater last night. I found out later it was her. I tore her ticket and everything. The girl was upset about something. I still can't believe I talked to her. Wow, that's crazy. Scout cocked an eyebrow. Are you being sarcastic? A little. I just find it fascinating how you made that tragedy all about you. Scout laughed. I did that, didn't I? They laughed again. Duke wants to make a movie about the murder. He's already writing the script. Oh, Lord. I can't wait to not see that. I'm helping him make it. Why? Because I already promised I'd help on the next movie, remember? I just didn't know it would be about this. Taylor's smile slowly faded. You shouldn't work on this. Why not? I don't know. It just seems wrong. Jaren said the same thing. You should listen to the douchebag. Scout laughed. Around 11, she left, hugging Taylor goodbye. When she got home, she found Jaren on the couch, playing a game on his large plasma TV. He played every day, for hours at a time. Scout didn't understand how he did it. Did you get lucky? Jaren asked. Shut up. Scout went to the kitchen by the front door and grabbed a soda. Have you seen any of the new script yet? No, but Duke said he has 12 pages written so far. Damn. How can he write about something he knows very little about? What can I say? He has a gift. Scout sat down and watched him play. Jaren had a large headset on, a microphone in front of his mouth. Scout looked at a bookcase by the back porch door, at a folded-up note sticking over the edge of a shelf. Did Duke piss you off with that comment about your dad? Jaren looked at her quickly before returning his gaze to the TV. A little, but I got over it. How's your dad doing anyway? She looked at the note again. Good. He writes every goddamn week, though. Never anything new. It's good to hear from him, though, right? He was never around when I was a kid. I don't know why he thinks I give a shit now. Scout nodded, but didn't say anything. Jaren had a hard life. He was a good guy, though he was prone to severe mood swings. He'd been arrested several times, mostly due to petty things like speeding tickets and warrants. Scout had never been arrested, so she couldn't imagine how one could do so that many times. She often gave Jaren a hard time about it, though it was only to shame the boy into being more careful with the law. Are you going to shoot Duke's next movie? Scout asked. Reluctantly. I've shot all his movies. I just don't get how he can make a movie about something that probably only took an hour. I mean, the guy killed the girl's boyfriend and she killed him in return. Not much of a movie. Oh, you didn't hear? Scout shook her head. Hear what? The killer was the girl's ex-boyfriend. Oh, so there's history. Yep. Duke had a field day with that information. He said he's going to interview people who knew the killer and the victim. Well, I saw the boyfriend chatting with the ushers last night when the girl came out searching for him. I don't know which ones he was talking to, though. I couldn't see that far down the hall. Duke will find out. He doesn't give up easy. Easily, Scout corrected. Shut the fuck up, he said with a laugh. Chapter 8. Duke figured 2 weeks was long enough to grieve. He chose to interview the girl, Ricky, whenever he could get her away from her parents. He convinced Scout to come with him, since she made the mistake of telling him she'd met the victim at the theater and had a nice conversation about the horror sequel. Plus, Duke said, girls stick together. Jaren refused to come along, stating he was too busy. Scout wished she'd thought of that too. She and Duke found Ricky in a bookstore, sitting in a chair and reading. Scout admired the girl. She admired anyone who liked reading. Duke sat in a chair next to her and pretended to read a book of his own. Scout sat in a chair across from them and stared in a different direction with her legs crossed. Ricky didn't seem to notice them. Duke looked at Scout, tilting his head in Ricky's direction. Scout waved him off, understanding. Excuse me, Scout said quietly. Ricky looked up and stared at her for a moment before recognition crossed her face. I remember you, she said. You work at the theater, right? That's right, Scout said with a smile. I love coming here on the weekends, before work. I didn't recognize you until a second ago. I heard about what happened. She stopped talking for a moment, a respectful pause. I'm sorry. Ricky, who had been smiling, suddenly frowned. Thank you. I saw that you were upset that night, Scout continued. Ricky nodded. My ex, Tony, texted me before the movie. What did he say? Ricky looked around, stared at Duke for a moment, and then leaned forward, closer to Scout. I don't really want to talk about this. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be so nosy. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. It's not every day I meet another girl who loves horror movies as much as I do. Ricky smiled another genuine smile. That's sweet of you. Thank you. If you ever want to get a coffee someday, or something, that would be cool with me. Ricky nodded. Sounds good to me, too. Here's my number. She wrote it down on a receipt she pulled from her purse, and then handed it to Scout. Call me sometime. She got up and left. Oh my God, Duke said with a laugh. That was awesome. What are you talking about? Getting her number, so you can interview her. Scout sighed. I didn't ask for her number. But you offered to hang out. We can use that. You're such an asshole. Scout got up and left. Duke ran after her. Come on, man. Don't do this to me. I'm not a man, and what am I doing to you exactly? You're totally fucking with me. You know how much this movie means to me? She shook her head. This isn't about you. It's about that poor girl. You shouldn't even make this movie. Oh, come on! He shouted, causing a few customers to look at him. He lowered his voice. Did you not see the way people reacted at the premiere? Everybody hated my movie. This movie, however, will really catch people's attention. For the wrong reasons. For the right reasons. The movie will be timely and informative. Everybody will know what really happened. Everyone knows what happened. Ricky's ex flipped out and tried to kill her. There has to be more to it. I want to be the one to tell everybody. Jesus Christ. Scout threw her hands up in exasperation and left the store. She told Jaren about the ambush once she got home. He was, once again, playing his video game. He shook his head. Dude, a boy said from the game, play and stop talking. Scout heard him from the TV's speakers, along with random chatter from Jaren's teammates. Jaren focused on the game. Freaking Call of Honor. Are you going to call her? He asked Scout. Maybe, but not for Duke's movie. She's so nice. She could use a friend right now. What are you doing for the 4th? Going downtown with Taylor and Gina. Seriously? Scout looked at him. What? You don't think that's a little weird? Not at all. It's a holiday, and Taylor and I are friends. Does Gina still see it that way? I don't give a rat's taint what Gina thinks. Jaren chuckled and took a sip of beer. God, I seriously don't want to make this movie. You're making a movie? A guy from the game asked. Scout figured it was the same one from earlier. No, now mind your business. He shot at a player's feet, causing the real people to laugh. Seriously, the boy continued. Tell me about the movie. Scout was bored, so she went to her room while Jaren gave a brief synopsis to his teammate. 2 days later, she drove to Taylor's apartment, indie rock blaring from the car's speakers. Gina smiled politely when she answered the door, but Scout felt it was false. Gina drove the three to downtown Fort Worth, where they struggled to find a parking spot. Then they walked several blocks to a hill, where many patrons set up blankets and picnics. Even though it was late, there were a lot of kids out. Scout hadn't celebrated the 4th of July in years because of work, but she got lucky this year. Taylor lay down between her girlfriend and Scout, one leg crossed over the other. Scout tried not to look at her smooth calves. Instead, she looked at the crew setting up the fireworks on the other side of the hill. How's the movie coming? Taylor asked. It's still in pre-production. Duke is writing the script. What movie? Gina asked. You remember that guy whose movie we went to? Taylor asked, looking over at her from her place on the ground. Oh, dear Lord, he's making another one? Taylor laughed so hard, a few people turned to look. Scout smiled and nodded. Scout says he's making another one based on something that happened recently. Somebody should tell that boy to just stop, Gina commented. I'm thirsty, Taylor told no one in particular. There's a soda vendor near the parking lot, Scout replied. Taylor rocked back and forth until she was on her feet. Then she walked down into the lot and out of sight. The sun was down. Scout glanced at Gina. Gina was staring at the lot, probably looking for her girlfriend. Can I ask you something? Gina said, still facing away from Scout. Sure. Is there something between you and Taylor? No. Was there something between you two? Scout hesitated. Gina turned to her. It's pretty obvious there was. I'm not mad, just as long as you two aren't going around behind my back. I swear, she and I are just friends. Absolutely nothing is going on. Good. Taylor returned 10 minutes later with 3 sodas. Scout accepted hers with a thanks. Then the fireworks began. They were so loud, Scout felt each explosion in her chest. It was amazing. During an explosion of orange, she saw someone ahead, closer to the crew. It was difficult to tell who at first, but when the girl turned her head to talk to a boy next to her, Scout realized it was Ricky. She looked back for just a second, but that was long enough for her to notice Scout. She waved. After the show, Gina, Taylor, and Scout walked through the lot when Ricky ran up to them. Hey again, she said. Hey, Scout replied with a friendly smile. I was planning on calling you this week to take you up on that coffee. She glanced at Taylor and Gina, who kept walking. Taylor looked back, though. Cool, Ricky said. Oh, this is my brother Raymond. She introduced the pimply teen behind her. He nodded to Scout. Those are my friends Gina and Taylor, and they kept walking, so they might leave me. You're making a movie? Raymond asked, trying so hard to make conversation with a stranger. Scout thought it was cute. He seemed shy. "We heard you talking earlier." "Yeah," she said nervously. "It's nothing. My friends are filmmakers, and I help out every now and then." "What's it about?" Ricky asked. "You," she almost replied, but stopped herself. "It's about the American visual effects industry's decline." Ricky nodded, a serious look on her face. "Sounds deep." All three laughed. "Well, I'll let you go," Ricky said. "Call me." "Absolutely." Scout waved goodbye to them and then caught up with the girls. When they got back to the apartment, Gina said she was tired. Taylor agreed and decided to call it a night. She walked Scout to her car and hugged her. The hug lasted longer than usual, though. On the way back to her own apartment, Scout smiled at the memory of the hug. That happy memory was tarnished when she got a text from Taylor the next day, stating they couldn't hang out anymore. When Scout texted back, she got no response. She was pissed, chalking this up to all the other times Taylor acted like this. The other times, it was the silent treatment. Scout almost preferred that to this cryptic text. Chapter 9. Jaron was driving down 820 when he got a text from Duke. "Pick up this mask," it read. A picture was attached. It was a white zombie mask with cracks running throughout. "Why?" Jaron texted back, trying to keep his eyes on the road. It was 8 in the evening, and there were many cars on the freeway. Scout would have killed him if she saw him texting and driving. He'd nearly gotten into many accidents when she rode with him, all because of that damn cell phone. "Because I found out the killer wore this mask." "Okay." Jaron sighed and took the next exit. He'd just come from a friend's house in the country and knew this area pretty well. There was a party supply store nearby, though he'd never gone to it before. He figured he might as well get it out of the way. He parked in the lot and went inside. He held his phone in front of him, comparing the zombie masks with the photo. He found a match and took it to the register. He did a double take when he saw the cashier. "Aren't you Taylor?" he asked, pointing at her. "Yes? Aren't you Scout's roommate?" "Yep." Taylor nodded with a grin on her face. Then she sighed and said, "You buying that?" She pointed to the mask. "Oh, yeah, sorry." He handed it to her. "I heard you and Scout aren't friends anymore." "You heard correctly." "Why not?" "It's complicated." "Oh, come on. Nothing's complicated. That's just what people say when they want to be dramatic." She frowned at him. "My girlfriend got mad." "Why? It's not like you and Scout were doing anything." "That's what I tried to tell Gina, but she didn't believe me." "So you're going to let your girlfriend tell you who to be friends with?" Taylor rang up the mask and told him the price. He paid, and then they stood in silence. "I love Gina and only want to see her happy." "Are you happy not being friends with Scout anymore?" She didn't answer. "Look, I don't know how lesbians work, but I do know it's possible to just be friends." Taylor laughed quietly. "I guess you're right." "So, are you going to talk to Scout again?" "Maybe. Don't tell her anything, though." "You got it." He waved and left the store. As soon as he got in his car, he knew something was wrong. Before he could turn around and look in the back seat, a hand grabbed his throat. "I hear you're making a movie," a deep voice said in his right ear. "What?" Jaron looked in his rearview mirror, but could only see a dark figure behind him. He must have been wearing a black mask and hoodie. "I suggest you give up on this movie. It just might get you killed." "Okay, man. I won't make the movie." A long pause. Jaron could feel the man's breath on his cheek. "I don't believe you. I think you need some convincing." Jaren's head was shoved forward. His nose hit the steering wheel once, twice. On the third strike, the nose broke. "Nice mask," the figure said just before Jaren passed out. "I think I'll take it." Chapter 10. Scout got the call from Duke that Jaren was in the hospital. She'd been lying in bed, staring at her cell phone and wondering if she should send Taylor an angry text when the phone suddenly rang, scaring the hell out of her. She raced to the hospital, where she found Duke and Jaren in a curtained area. She gasped when she saw Jaren's face. His nose looked broken, and bruises were appearing under his eyes. "Jesus, what happened?" "Somebody beat the shit out of him," Duke said. "I can see that. Why? Who did it?" "I don't know," Jaren said quietly. He sounded tired. "I didn't see his face. He was waiting for me in the back of my car." Scout held herself as she stood in the cold emergency room. She hated hospitals. They were so white and weird-smelling. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah, I don't look forward to paying this bill." "Who do you think it was?" Duke asked. "Probably the boyfriend of one of those skanks he always brings home," Scout guessed. "They're not skanks," Jaren said defensively. "You're a skank." Scout giggled. She felt a little better about her friend's condition. He had that effect on her. "Seriously, who could it have been?" "Someone who knows we're making the movie." Duke looked at Scout. "Have you told anyone?" "No," she wanted to say. "A couple of people." "Who?" "Taylor and Gina." "Oh, they're just chicks. No offense." "Some taken, you skinny fuck." Scout knew he didn't mean anything harsh by it, but she hated the way he talked to her. "Who did you tell?" he asked Jaren. "Some friends online." "Dude!" Jaren sighed. "There you go," Duke said. "It had to be one of them. They're guys and all riled up with testosterone." "You're so goddamn sexist," Scout said with faux offense. "A woman could easily beat up Jaren." To Jaren, she said, "No offense." "Some taken, you skinny fuck." She patted his arm. "Still, it could happen. Gina is pretty strong looking." "You mean that Asian lesbo?" Duke asked. "Jesus." Scout tried to kick him, but he jumped backward. "But yes, her. She could probably wipe the floor with old Jaren here." "Oh my God," Jaren said. "I'm imagining her wiping the floor with Taylor. Everybody leave. I'm getting an erection." Duke and Scout laughed. "Oh," Jaren said suddenly. "I talked to Taylor just before the attack. I told her she should be friends with you again." "Jaren, why?" Scout stomped her foot. "I don't want her to know I miss her." "She doesn't. I made it sound like I personally thought it was a bullshit move. I think she went for it." "Really?" "Yep. She said she'd think about it." Scout sat down on the bed next to him. "Way to go, straight boy." "Did you get the mask?" Duke asked. Jaren looked at him. "The guy took it after he attacked me." "What? Damn it, Jaren." "Sorry I was fearful for my life, asshole. I thought he was going to kill me. The last thing I was going to do was say, 'You can beat me up, but you can't take the mask.' Right?" Duke pouted. "I guess we can get another one." "Another one?" Scout said incredulously. "You're not still thinking of making the movie, are you?" "Of course I am." "What the fuck, Duke?" "I'm not gonna let some pansy-ass bitch scare me out of making a movie. Did Uwe Boll stop making movies when people told him to stop?" "Did you just compare yourself to Uwe Boll?" Jaren asked. "Whatever. You know what I mean. We can't be intimidated by some freak who won't even show his face." "You weren't intimidated," Scout said. Jaren was. Look at his face. It's hideous. Thanks, babe. She looked at his bruised face. Sorry, but it is. You're so fucking ugly now. And you could have died. We don't know who this guy is, but we know what he wants. We shouldn't make the movie. Duke walked up to the bed. Jaren, are you all right? I guess. Are you physically capable of shooting this movie? He hesitated. I guess. The question you should be asking is, do you want to shoot this movie? Scout said, angry with Duke for what he was doing to Jaren. How long have we been working together? Duke asked him. 12 years. How many movies have we made? 3. 3? Scout asked. That's it? In 12 years? We all have lives, Duke said. It's difficult to get everyone together. Back to Jaren. Are you seriously going to leave me hanging like this? I don't want to shoot the movie with anyone else. Besides, that guy doesn't have to know we're still making it, as long as we keep the details to ourselves. That means not telling your online friends, Jaren, and not telling your hot lesbian friends, Scout. She got up from the bed and stood by the curtain. Duke and Jaren watched her. Jaren? She said. He shrugged, though he didn't look happy. If we keep production close to the belt, and maybe change the names of the characters, I guess I don't see any harm. Besides, Duke piped in, I just finished the script today. How did you find out about the mask? Jaren asked. I have a friend who's a cop in a different county. He heard about it. I asked. End of story. Part 2. Production. Chapter 11. Scout couldn't believe she was admitting this, but the first night of filming was rather exciting. She stood in the back portion of a diner in downtown Fort Worth, where Duke had shot part of his last movie. The owner was a nice guy who was willing to accommodate the young filmmaker, as long as it didn't interfere with business. Jaren set up his camera next to one of the booths, where the first scene was to take place. Scout looked over at the two actors playing Ricky and her ill-fated boyfriend Sean. They were Duke's friends and had appeared in his previous 3 films. Scout couldn't remember their names, but the girl was attractive, with long black hair. She didn't look anything like the real Ricky, but Duke had renamed the characters, so it mattered little. Ricky's character was now Nicky, and Sean was Sam. Ready to film in 5 minutes, Duke announced, sitting at a table in the center of the dining area and going over the script pages. Scout grabbed the microphone and walked over to Jaren. I can't believe you're still working on the movie, she said. I can't let Duke down. I just hope he realizes on his own this is a bad idea. You haven't had any more run-ins with the guy who beat you up? It's been a week. No, we've been secretive. I've been spreading rumors during games that we killed off the movie. Smart man, she sighed. I still don't get the point of this movie. Duke needs to redeem himself after the last one. It was pretty terrible. Scout looked at Duke, who was now speaking with the actors. He's such a bully, though. Almost as bad as my dad. She looked at him again. I thought your dad wasn't around much. But he was around sometimes. He used to smack me around. One time, I caught him yelling at Mom. I just stood there, hoping he would stop when he saw me. You know what he did? Scout shook her head, though she figured she knew. He beat the shit out of me. That is pretty bad, she replied, not knowing what to say. Duke reminds me of my dad sometimes, only less violent. All right, everyone, we're ready to shoot, Duke said, walking toward the TV Jaren connected to the camera. It was their own little video village. Sound! That was Scout's cue to hold the mic over the actors' heads. Rolling. Jaren started recording. Action. Thanks for finally calling me, Nikki said to Sam. I didn't think you ever would. Why didn't you think I would? Because you're super hot and I'm super not. Scout rolled her eyes. Ricky would never say something that pathetic. Thinking of her, however, reminded Scout that she still needed to call her. It had been a week since they'd run into each other at the fireworks show. I needed this date, Nikki went on. Anything to take my mind off my ex-boyfriend. He a bad guy? Sam asked. Very. He's fat and stupid and gross. I think he's stalking me. Want me to kick his ass for you? Nikki laughed. Okay. She twirled her hair and winked at him. Jesus Christ, Scout whispered to herself. This movie wasn't looking much better than the last. Duke hoped to have filming completed in 2 weeks, which was shorter than his last endeavor. This movie would have less action and effects work, though. They filmed for 20 minutes, doing multiple takes from different angles. Then Duke called it a wrap and thanked everyone. Jaren unhooked the TV and packed it away. Scout started putting away the mic when Duke cursed. We forgot to film one scene. It's the one where the ex calls Nikki while the new boyfriend is in the bathroom. Want me to get the monitor back out? Jaren asked. No, let's just film it real fast. Duke told the actress what they were doing. Sam sat at a booth in the far corner behind her, looking bored. Action, Duke called as Jaren started the camera. Scout had the mic over Nikki's head. Why are you calling me? She said into her own personal cell phone. Of course, there was no one on the other line. The magic of filmmaking. Scout looked at Jaren, who was smiling as he recorded. She smiled too, though she didn't know why. Maybe it was the cheesy dialogue. Leave me alone, Nikki yelled as she pretended to hang up. Cut. Beautiful. Now that is a wrap. Chapter 12. That most certainly was not a wrap. As it turned out, Sam, who'd been innocently sitting in the corner of the dining room, minding his own business, had been in the shot while Nikki had been talking to her ex. Since the monitor hadn't been reconnected to the camera, no one had noticed the new boyfriend who was supposed to be in the bathroom during the scene. Duke was furious because it meant they would have to return to the diner to refilm the scene. He took out his frustration on his crew, all 2 of them. Jaren and Scout sat in their living room while Duke paced back and forth, yelling, Jaren, you're my DP. How could you not see there was someone in the shot who wasn't supposed to be? Sorry, dude. I was focusing on the girl. The guy was way in left frame. This is so unprofessional. You're unprofessional, Scout yelled back, unable to take this anymore. We're making your movie for free during our own time, and this is how you repay us? By yelling? What's wrong with you? Duke stared at her with wide eyes. Excuse me? You heard me, goddammit. You should treat us with more respect. Jaren got beat up because of this movie, and you're still making it. Just because everyone hated your last one doesn't mean you can take it out on us. He continued staring at her. You're right, he finally said. I'm sorry. Making movies is stressful, and I keep forgetting. You guys are great. He smiled. Maybe you shouldn't make this one, Jaren piped in from the couch. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Well, I'm not giving up on this movie. Not even if my actors get their heads chopped off. I'll just get new actors. Scout and Jaren exchanged looks. Finally, Scout said, Whatever you say, boss. They continued filming for the rest of the week, and no one got killed yet. Duke begged the diner's owner to let them borrow the dining room for 5 minutes while they filmed one quick scene. Then Duke edited the footage they had so far. It actually turned out pretty well, in Scout's eyes. Just another week left. Chapter 13. That weekend, Duke decided to celebrate the first week of filming. He invited Jaren, Scout, Amanda, aka Nikki, and Seth, aka Sam, out for drinks at an Irish bar down the street from the movie theater. Jaren and Scout carpooled. They walked in around 8 o'clock and were immediately assaulted by the live band on the stage directly in front of the entrance. Its music blared from the large speakers in front of the stage. Scout covered her ears, grinning at her roommate. He grinned back and cocked his head toward the far end of the bar. Duke waved at them from a table. Scout nodded to Amanda and Seth as she sat across from them. She didn't know if they were together or not, but they sure seemed to like each other. Maybe they were fuck buddies. "I showed our stars the footage," Duke told the newcomers, "and they agree it's awesome. Next week, we start filming the bloody stuff, now that we've gotten the setup out of the way." "There was only one murder," Scout said. "That should only take one night to film, I would think." "I decided to add a few more murders to the script," Duke said with an evil grin. "Why?" "Because it's lame to only have one. I figured if this Tony guy was capable of murdering Sean, then he was capable of murdering others." "Who was playing Tony anyway?" Jaren asked. "Me." "Are you serious?" "I dabble in acting too," Duke said defensively. "Besides, I'm pretty strong looking. I'll make a terrific serial killer." Scout laughed as a waitress took their drink order. Scout ordered a beer, like always. "No one really knows what went on in that house that night," she said to Duke. "How will we film it?" "Well, we would know if Miss Congeniality over here," he pointed to Scout, "actually got the information from the source like I asked her to." Scout gave him the finger. "So feisty," he joked. "But we'll improvise. It'll be fun." "You met the real person?" Amanda asked Scout, her voice full of awe. "Yes. She's really nice. I feel terrible making this behind her back, though." Amanda nodded. "I totally understand." "Where are we filming my death scene?" Seth asked Duke, running his fingers through his perfect blonde hair. "My house." "Isn't that out in Azle?" "Yes." Seth rolled his eyes and turned away. "What?" Duke asked, offended. "My house is perfect. It's 2 stories, with plenty of space for chasing. Plus, my dad won't be there." "That makes me nervous," Scout said suddenly. "I mean, what if Jaren's attacker shows up and kills us all out there in the country?" "This isn't like your favorite movie, Scout. That guy doesn't even know we're filming. Plus, there's no way he can know where I live. We'll be fine." She nodded as the drinks arrived. She was, indeed, thinking about her favorite horror movie, about the party at the large house in the middle of nowhere. People had died as the masked killer picked them off one by one. Scout vowed never to put herself in such a situation, though she often wondered what it would be like to be the heroine in a horror film, being chased by a killer only to narrowly escape. As terrifying as that sounded, it also sounded like fun. The group had a few drinks and got thoroughly buzzed. Seth whispered in Amanda's ear often, making her laugh. Scout looked at Jaren and smooched her lips in mockery. Jaren suddenly kissed her. Scout, surprised by the kiss, pulled away. "Jaren!" "Sorry, I thought you wanted me to kiss you." "Why would you think that?" "I don't know." Duke and the others were staring at them. "You know I don't roll that way," Scout told Jaren, almost laughing. She was trying to ease the situation. "Oh, come on," he said. "You're not really a lesbian." That stunned her. "Excuse me?" "You just tell everyone that because you think it makes you more interesting." Scout couldn't stop herself. She slapped him in the face, got up, and left the bar. Jaren was right behind her. I'm sorry, he said in the relative quiet of the parking lot. The music was a muffled thud in the distance. I'm not talking to you right now, she replied as she walked onto the service street. Where are you going? I'm your ride, remember? I'll walk. And that she did, never looking back. Chapter 14. A few minutes later, a car pulled up behind her. Need a lift? She looked in and saw Seth, smiling a perfect smile at her. Thanks. She got in and directed him to her apartment. So, are you really a lesbian? He asked along the way. Yes. That's cool. I dated a lesbian once. Scout was starting to regret accepting the ride. The interior smelled of way too much musky cologne. This guy was a preppy douche. He pulled up to the coded keypad, but she told him to drive up to the gate instead. She said she wanted to check the mailbox first. He stared at her for a moment. You're very pretty, he said. Thank you. So are you. She wondered if he knew she was making fun of his well-maintained looks. He wasn't buff, but he appeared lean. His hair was styled in a way that reminded Scout of 80s-era jocks. Thank you, he said, completely oblivious. You know, if this lesbian thing doesn't work out, we should hang out sometime. I'll let you know when I'm not gay anymore, she said as she got out. Seth backed up as she walked to the mail area next to the gate. It was a locked corridor, and she had to struggle to remember the code. She'd had one too many beers. Finally, she got the door open and checked her mailbox. Just a couple of circulars and another letter from Jaren's dad. She went out the other end of the corridor, which was on the other side of the complex, and crossed over to her building. Walking up the stairs was a task, but she endured. When she got to her door, she cursed. It was open again. She entered and locked it behind her. When she got to her room, she dropped to her bed and stared at the ceiling. Looking over to her nightstand, she saw the book she'd borrowed from Taylor weeks ago. She hadn't even started it, but looking at it now reminded her the two were no longer friends. Again. Scout grabbed the book and read the first page, her vision swimming from the alcohol. A few minutes later, her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Hello? Hello. The voice was deep, but she didn't recognize it. Who's this? Who do you think? Jaren? Who's Jaren? Not you, I guess. She looked at the number on the caller ID again. It was a local one. I think you have the wrong number. There was a long pause. Then, I hear you're making a movie. Scout sat up quickly. What makes you think that? I've been watching you. You have? Uh-huh. We're not making a movie. Don't lie to me, you little bitch. Scout hung up and threw her phone to the end of the bed. It rang again. Against her better judgment, she answered. What? I thought I made it clear to your boyfriend I didn't want you making this movie. You're the one who beat Jaren up? She asked, ignoring the inaccurate assumption about their relationship. Yeah, I messed him up real good, didn't I? You sure did, but it didn't seem to work, did it? She was getting angrier by the second. I guess I'll have to be more persuasive, starting with you. What do you mean? She asked, her heart racing. She'd never been threatened like this before. Another long pause, this one lasting at least 10 seconds. Then, I'm right outside your bedroom door. Scout looked at her door, which was closed. Then she looked at her bathroom door, which was open. So was the one that led to the hallway by the front door. She'd forgotten to close them. Her heart was pounding now. No, you're not, she said. There was a noise coming from the door now. It sounded like scratching. It was so soft it was barely perceptible. She could have been imagining it. Hear that? The man asked. How about this? Suddenly there were 3 loud taps. Scout gasped and jumped to her feet, standing on the far side of the bed. She simply stared at her door, waiting for it to open. But it didn't. I know you heard that, the voice teased. Scout walked slowly toward the door. She reached out and locked it quickly. The knob turned, first a little, and then more violently. She ran to the bathroom, closing and locking the far door. She didn't think she'd have time to run out the front door. Whoever was out there would intercept her before she even got it open. In her frightened mind, however, she had a plan. She heard heavy footsteps just outside the bathroom door. She crossed over and closed the other door, but she stayed in the bathroom. She jumped into the tub and closed the dark curtain just as the first door was smashed in. The wind hit the curtain, and Scout had to hold her hands hard against her mouth to keep from screaming. She saw a silhouette cross the bathroom and open the second door to the bedroom. Scout made her move. She jumped out of the tub and ran for the front door. The figure was right behind her. As she ran past the washer and dryer, she tipped over Jaren's hamper and heard the man trip over it. She ran down the steps and across the parking lot, screaming for help. She didn't have to look behind her to know the man was there. She could hear his feet hitting the pavement, same as hers. She ran toward the mailboxes. If she could only get to the corridor. She slammed against the grilled door and frantically punched in the code. Luckily, she got it correct on the first try and pulled the door open. The man lunged at her, inadvertently slamming it closed between them. Scout backed into the center of the corridor and stared at him. He was wearing all black pants, black hoodie, but his face was white. It was a zombie's face. He looked down at the coded lock and began punching in the code. Did he know it? How could he? Then he stopped and looked at her again. She could feel his eyes from that cracked white mask. Suddenly he turned away and ran off. To where, Scout had no clue. But she didn't care, as long as he was far away from here. A loud pounding behind her spun Scout around. There was another man standing at the opposite end of the corridor, on the outside of the complex. What's going on? Jaren asked her. Scout had never been happier to see him before. Chapter 15. I need you to go over the events again, Officer Hightower told Scout as she sat on her couch. His partner stood by the front door. She sighed. I came home and found the door open because it's broken. She gave Jaren a dirty look as he stood in the kitchen. Then I went to my room and got a call from the guy who beat up Jaren. He said he was going to make an example out of me. Then he chased me out of the apartment. The cop nodded as he made notes. Then you ran into your roommate outside? Yes, we came back here. Jaren searched the place, and then we called you. I take it the apartment was empty? You didn't find anything out of the ordinary? No, officer, Jaren said, sitting down next to Scout. Do you have any idea who would want to hurt you? Jaren and Scout said no at the same time. Scout was about to tell the cop about the movie when Duke suddenly walked through the front door. I just heard what happened, he said, out of breath. Are you okay, Scout? Who are you? The cop asked him. He's a friend, Jaren said. I texted him a few minutes ago. He's okay. The cops noticeably relaxed. To Scout, he said, We'll check your phone record and see if we can track the caller. Scout nodded and thanked him. As soon as the cops left, Duke went nuts. Oh my God, this is getting so crazy. Scout stared at him. Why do you sound excited about this? I'm not. It's just that you went through a real-life chase scene. You're like Laurie Strode and Nancy Thompson rolled into one. Scout couldn't help but grin. The guy who chased me hasn't killed anyone yet. He's no Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger. It's not the same. We don't know that he hasn't killed anyone. She threw up her hands in defeat. Fine, but I am officially off the movie. It was one thing when Jaren got slapped around like a bitch, but now this fucker's coming after me. I don't need any more incentive to back out. I'm sorry, Duke. He shrugged. I can always find someone else to hold a mic. I'll miss you. I'm so sure. She rolled her eyes. I really think you should stop with the movie, though. I mean, our efforts to keep it secret obviously failed if he knows about it. She looked at Jaren. Right? He shrugged. I agree. You two are unbelievable, Duke shouted. Scout, I can make do without you. But Jaren, I need you. We only have one more week of shooting, maybe less. Please? Jaren stared at him. Scout saw something in his eyes she'd only seen when she caught him reading his father's letters. Fine, he said after an uncomfortably long silence. If Scout's attack won't help you see reason, I guess nothing will. Yes, Duke cheered. I swear, we'll be even more secretive. Jaren nodded, barely paying attention anymore. Scout suddenly remembered something. You got another letter from your dad, she told her roommate. It's on the kitchen counter. He nodded without looking at her, then got up and went to his room, grabbing the letter on the way. What was that about? Duke asked Scout. Good night, Duke. Chapter 16. The next day, Scout decided to call Ricky and finally meet for coffee. They met at a coffee house that was fairly close to both of their homes. Scout's heart raced for some reason as she entered the cafe and searched for the girl she was to meet. Ricky waved from a table on the far end in front of the counter. She looked beautiful today, with her red hair pulled back in a ponytail. She smiled as Scout ordered her drink and then sat down. Sorry I'm late, Scout said, placing her purse on the floor. This week has been rough. I'm sorry to hear that. What happened? I was attacked last night. Ricky gasped. Are you all right? Yeah, I managed to escape. It was still scary, though. I'll bet. Glad you're okay. Scout smiled. Ricky sounded sincere, even though she barely knew her. Do you know who attacked you? Scout was about to tell her he was wearing a zombie mask, the same one Ricky's own ex wore when he attacked her. Though it made Scout feel she had a strong connection to the woman, she also didn't want to remind Ricky of that terrible night. The cops are looking into it, she finally replied. Ricky nodded. Well, besides last night, what happened with the rest of your week? Didn't you say you're making a movie? Yeah, I just quit the movie last night, though. Oh? Why? The subject matter is too dark for me. I prefer comedies. Scout didn't like lying, but telling the truth would raise too many questions. I thought you loved horror movies, Ricky said quietly. I remember you saying that the night we met. The night... She stopped herself and looked away. Scout knew she was going to say, the night my boyfriend was killed. I love watching horror movies, but not making them, she clarified. I see, Ricky said. She studied Scout with narrow eyes in a way that made her heart flutter a little. Who were those girls you were with? Scout did a double take. What girls? The one at the fireworks show. Oh, those were my friends Taylor and Gina. They're girlfriends. Oh, you mean, like, gay girlfriends? Yep. Oh, that's sweet. I love gay people. Then you should love me. Scout closed her eyes and bit her tongue at the slip. She didn't care who knew about her, but the way she'd phrased that last sentence made it sound like she was hitting on Ricky. "Oh," Ricky said slowly. "I had no idea. Interesting." The way she said interesting also made Scout's heart flutter. She couldn't deny she found Ricky attractive, but she would never hit on a straight girl. Besides, she didn't know much about her other than the fact she was beautiful and loved horror movies. Scout's phone rang. She apologized to Ricky and answered it. "Is this Scout Gallery?" a male voice asked. "It's Galley, and yes." "This is Officer Hightower. We spoke last night?" "Oh, yes. Hello again, officer." "We were able to track the source of the call from last night. It came from a cell phone that was allegedly stolen from a bar near your apartment." "Really? What bar?" Scout already knew the answer. "Irish Phil's. I believe you said you and your friends were at that bar as well, correct?" "That's correct, officer." "A young woman said her phone went missing last night. If that's true, then whoever stole her phone was in that bar. He may have been watching one or all of you." Scout shivered. "Do you believe the girl when she says her phone was stolen?" "Yes, I looked into it. She took a cab home around 2 in the morning, shortly after you were attacked, and since she couldn't be in 2 places at once." "I understand, officer." "We also tracked the phone. It was in your apartment complex, near the area of your attack." "The guy ditched it when he ran away?" she guessed. "I assume so, yes." "Okay, thank you, officer. I feel a little better." "No problem. If I find out anything else, I'll let you know. Have a nice day." "You too." She hung up and told Ricky the news. "Well, that's something," Ricky said with a grin. "So, which one of those girls are you in love with?" Scout spit out her coffee, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" She laughed. "Taylor Regina." "Neither." After a moment, she said, "Taylor." "Was she the short one with the buzz cut?" "Yes." "She was cute. Great legs, too." "I know. We're actually not friends anymore." "Oh? Why not?" Scout sighed. "I'm still not sure, really. She does this to me a lot. She'll have a problem and then give me the silent treatment. It's annoying as hell." "And that's something you put up with?" "When you put it that way," Scout laughed. Ricky joined her. "It sounds like you're better off." "That's what everyone tells me. Life's too short to deal with all that crazy." "But..." "I still miss her. We'd been friends for years. There was never a dull moment between us. We always had something to talk about. I liked her a lot." Ricky looked sad. "That's how it was between Sean and me." "I'm so sorry about what happened." "It's not your fault, but thank you." "You seem to be managing pretty well, though." Ricky smiled. "Thanks to my brother. He's a great support system." "He seemed nice." "He is, and he's single." She suddenly put her hand to her mouth. "Oh, I forgot. Sorry." Scout laughed. "It's okay. Thanks for trying, though. If I were straight, I'd definitely give him a call." They laughed again. Scout felt much better than when she came in. Later in the afternoon, once she got back to her apartment, she got a text from Taylor. She was surprised by this text because it asked her if she wanted to hang out that night. Chapter 17. Duke walked into the party supply store and went straight for the masks. Since the last zombie mask was stolen, he decided to buy a new one himself. He stayed the hell away from the store Jaren had gone to. He found the zombie mask he was looking for and took it to the counter. The cashier chuckled. "This mask is really popular." "Oh yeah?" Duke asked. "Yeah, I had another guy come in a few days ago to buy one. Really? My friend bought one from the store in White Settlement, but it was stolen. Getting a jump on Halloween? Duke was about to tell him he was making a movie, but caught himself. The last thing he wanted was for more people knowing. Theme party next weekend, he lied. Cool. Duke paid and left the store. He checked his back seat before getting into the car. Once inside, he locked his door and made sure the others were locked as well. He hated being so jumpy and would never admit it to anyone, but it didn't hurt to be cautious. He drove down the lonely Azle Highway, wishing he'd gone to the store sooner. He couldn't shake a feeling of dread, like something bad was about to happen to him. He checked his rearview mirror and saw only one car far behind him. As he drove, he wondered why Jaren and Scout were attacked rather than him. If this guy wanted them to stop making a movie, it seemed a better idea to attack the writer/director, not the sound girl and the camera guy. Not that Duke wanted to be attacked, but it seemed like bad planning on the attacker's part. The car behind him got closer. Too close. He stared at its blinding light for a moment, and then got over onto the left lane to see what it would do. The car suddenly sped up and zoomed by him. He saw the driver was a pretty girl blaring pop music from her radio. Duke sighed with relief. He was even more relieved when he got home. His house was large but not particularly pretty. It was settled on a dirt road far from the highway, with a trench by the mailbox. The white paint was peeling in multiple spots, and the wraparound porch was surrounded by a tattered screen. He parked next to where his dad parked his truck, wishing he were home as well. His dad worked overnight as a delivery driver for a major shipping company and was guaranteed to be gone until morning. As excited as Duke was about filming the finale this coming week, he didn't want to be alone. He thought of calling his ex-girlfriend, who lived nearby, but knew she would tell him to go to hell. As he walked to the porch, he thought he heard a sneeze in the woods to his right, just past his car. He stood there for a moment, waiting for the sound to return, trying to convince himself it was a dog or something. The sound didn't repeat. He walked up the steps and went through the screen door onto the porch. He then unlocked the front door, hopped inside, and quickly locked it. His heart was racing, and he couldn't explain why, but he felt a little better being inside. He put the mask down on the kitchen island and made a sandwich. Though his house was large on the outside, it was surprisingly cluttered on the inside. There were dirty clothes all over the living room, which was situated a few inches lower than the kitchen. The laundry room was directly across from the kitchen, with 2 wooden 2x4s acting as a little bridge between a large gap in the floor. The house had its problems, but it was comfortable. Duke went down into the living room to gather the clothes when he heard a tapping coming from one of the windows. He looked through the curtain, but saw nothing on the dark porch. He went back to gathering clothes, figuring he could do a load or two before Dad got home. He put some whites into the washing machine and then remembered the laundry chute behind him. He slid open the panel for the chute that was built into the wall. Sure enough, there were more clothes in there. The other end of the chute was in the center of the upstairs hallway. He'd put these clothes in here himself, and he sighed as he threw them in the machine. Ever since his mom died 4 years ago, he'd had to help out a lot more around the house than ever before. He slowly grew used to cooking and cleaning and treasured his time away from the house, time spent making movies with his friends. He didn't think he would ever be able to explain that to Scout, but Jaren understood. Duke figured that's why his friend refused to give up on the movie, even though he was attacked because of it. After starting the laundry, he went back to the kitchen to eat his sandwich. He stood there, leaning against the island, trying to figure out why his dread suddenly returned. He'd felt fine after getting inside the house, but something was wrong now. He just couldn't figure out. He turned around and looked down at the island, to where he'd placed the mask. It was gone. He searched around on the floor and in the living room. It was nowhere to be found. He then returned to the laundry room. Suddenly, the lights went out in the entire house. "Oh shit," Duke whispered, dropping his sandwich. He stood in the dark laundry room, looking out into the kitchen directly ahead. The only light came from the shining moon from the windows. He stood there, left hand on the now silent washing machine, listening. He heard something. It sounded like breathing. He wanted to run out of the house, get into his car, and drive away. He feared he would be attacked, however, by whoever had cut the power and stolen the mask. The one who'd attacked Jaren and Scout had to be here. Duke's fear was suddenly replaced with anger. Whoever this was thought he could bully Duke into quitting his film. They had another thing coming. Duke looked to the chute on his right. Though it was pitch black in the room, he knew exactly where it was and that it was still open. He climbed inside, the way he used to when he was a kid. Upstairs was his dad's hunting rifle. Duke knew he could climb the inside of the chute to get upstairs. He hadn't done it in years, but some things you just don't forget how to do. He knew the trick of using his feet to support his weight. The only real trick was to do it quietly. Once inside, he slowly closed the lid. He then started working his way up the cramped space. The loudest thing was his breathing. There was another sound. Duke recognized it as someone crossing the 2x4s just outside the laundry room. The clip-clop of feet on the boards, the groan of weight as the wood bent. Duke waited, not daring to move. If he was lucky, the guy didn't know where he was. Suddenly, something clicked outside the chute's sliding panel. It almost sounded like a deadbolt, like the kind Duke used on his high school locker back in the day. He started climbing again. He was almost to the top. His breath quickened as he feared being trapped inside the chute. He didn't think the intruder could reach him from the bottom or the top, but he still didn't like the idea of spending hours in here until Dad got home. Suddenly, the top of the chute opened. Duke stopped, gasping from shock. He waited, hoping the intruder didn't know for a fact he was in there. Something fell down the chute and hit him in the head. He saw a blinding light for a second from the pane as the object fell down to his knee and hit the bottom of the chute. Duke felt his head, where the thing hit him, and felt warm blood. The wound stung from the sweat of his palm. Another object fell down the chute and struck his shoulder. He continued to stay silent. Maybe the intruder was guessing, trying to make him cry out in pain. Duke wouldn't indulge him. A full minute of silence went by. After that, the chute closed. Duke silently thanked God. Suddenly, he remembered his cell phone in his pocket. He made sure his feet were planted against the sides before chancing reaching into his pocket. He cursed silently when he saw he had no signal. He used the light to see what had been dropped on him. There were 2 bricks resting at the bottom of the chute. Fucking bricks. "What is this? Home Alone 2? He asked quietly. The top of the chute opened again. Duke looked up and saw something snaking its way into the chute with him. He waited, his heart racing once again. He had no idea at what he was looking. Suddenly, something started to pour onto him. It was cold and didn't have a smell. Water. The motherfucker was trying to drown him. The thing above him was a hose, probably from the backyard, where the extra bricks had been set. The water came slowly but surely. It would take a while for it to settle at the bottom and reach him. He continued climbing, deciding he would handle the attacker when he reached him. Suddenly, another brick fell and hit him in the head. This one hurt more than the other 2. Another fell, stunning him. Suddenly, he was sitting in a pool of water, and it took him a moment to realize he'd lost his grips on the sides of the chute and had fallen to the very bottom. His knees were directly in front of him, his arms on his sides. He couldn't move, couldn't stand. He couldn't climb out of this water. "Help!" he screamed, though he knew it would do no good. "Please stop!" The water continued to fall, continued to build around him. He was going to drown in his laundry chute. "I'll stop making the movie, I swear." A moment later, the water stopped pouring onto him from the hose above. It had built up to his shoulders. His chin was resting on the surface of the pool. He sat there for a few minutes, waiting for something else to happen. A minute later, the panel in front of his feet opened and the water gushed out. Someone grabbed his ankles and pulled him out. Duke fell on the floor, coughing and dizzy. It was still dark in the house, but he saw one thing hovering above him. A white face. A zombie face. Then the face backed away. Duke faintly heard the weight on the 2x4s again, and then the front door opened and closed. Duke lay there for a while, unable to move, unable to believe how close to death he'd come. Chapter 18. Scout hated herself for accepting Taylor's invitation to hang out. Before she knew it, she was on 820, driving toward White Settlement. She took the familiar exit, crossed the overpass, and waited at the gate. She wouldn't have been surprised if Taylor changed her mind and refused to let her through, but the gate opened. Scout drove through and parked across from Taylor's building. She slowly walked up the stairs, 1 flight, 2 flights, 3 flights, and then walked to the corner of the top floor. She was about to knock on the door when it suddenly opened. Taylor stood there, in her usual plaid pajama pants. "Hey," Scout said quietly. "Hey." Taylor backed away to let in her guest. Scout stood behind the couch, looking around the nice apartment. Though it was dark, she could still see the freeway through the large bay window by the kitchen. It was a sight that triggered familiar warmth in her. "Want something to drink?" Taylor asked. "Yeah, a soda if you have it." "I have a box of wine." Scout stared at her for a second before nodding. "I'll take a glass of that." Taylor grinned, went to the kitchen, and filled 2 glasses. When she returned, they went to her bedroom. Scout smiled when she saw that Taylor had been playing a role-playing game on her computer. Her little avatar stood in place in the middle of a large purple city as a crowd of other avatars walked past her. "You're still playing this game?" she asked Taylor. "You're still listening to that indie rock?" Taylor shot back. "Touché." Scout sat at the end of the bed as Taylor went back to the game. Scout sipped her wine, puckering at the bitter taste. It brought back memories of years ago, when she and Taylor first met and drank the same stuff. "You don't happen to have any of that strawberry cake?" Taylor looked over her shoulder. "No, sorry." Scout scanned the bookshelf next to Taylor's desk. "Damn, I forgot to bring your book back." "No problem. Did you read it?" "Some of it. I had trouble after a while, because you decided not to be friends with me again." Taylor looked at her again. "Gina and I broke up." Scout didn't know how to respond to that. On one level, she was happy about that, though she didn't know why. On another, she felt bad. She'd seen Gina and Taylor together enough times over the years to know they truly loved each other. "Why?" she finally asked. Taylor went back to playing. Without looking back, she said, "We just didn't get along anymore." "When did you break up?" "A week ago." "Are you going to move out?" "As soon as I can. I can't afford to right now, so I sleep in the other room." Scout looked out of the bedroom to the other room at the end of the hall. "That must be awkward." "Very much so." "I'm guessing she's out of town again?" "Yep, like always." "Is that why you broke up? Because she's never here?" "That's part of the reason." She looked at Scout again. Scout took a gulp of wine, emptying the glass. "Can I get more?" Taylor nodded. Scout went to the kitchen, already feeling the wine hitting her. It felt good. The last time she drank the boxed wine was years ago, when she and Taylor fooled around every time they hung out. It wasn't technically sex, but it came pretty damn close. She returned to the room and sat down. "Why did you text me?" "Because I missed you." "Did you now?" "I ran into your friend Jaren at work. Did he tell you?" "Yes. He said he tried to convince you to be friends with me again." "That he did. I can't believe he was attacked in the parking lot. I didn't know what was going on when the cops and ambulance showed up." Scout hadn't thought about that at all. That Taylor was only feet away during the attack. That made her shiver. "You didn't see who attacked him then?" "No, I just remember help showing up shortly after he left the store." Scout nodded and drank the wine. "How's the movie going?" Taylor asked after a long moment of silence. "I don't know. I quit it." "Why?" "Because the guy who attacked Jaren attacked me too." Taylor did a double take. "What? Are you serious? Are you all right?" Scout chuckled. "I'm fine, but it scared me. The guy who attacked us didn't want us making the movie. I didn't need to be told twice." Taylor screwed up her face in thought. "That's weird." "What is?" "After you told Gina and me about the movie, Gina got pissed. She thought it was disgusting that a terrible filmmaker like Duke, no offense, would try to profit off someone else's pain like that." "Really?" Scout tried to imagine Gina attacking Jaren and chasing her out of the apartment. The figure had been of average height, like nearly all her friends. "I know what you're thinking," Taylor said. "Gina was in San Marcos the night your roommate was attacked." Scout finished her wine and nodded. "That's good to know. Want some more wine?" "I shouldn't. I'm already buzzing like a son of a bitch." In fact, she was buzzing so much that she almost had the courage to propose something. But she bit her tongue and watched Taylor play. After an hour, the words finally came out. "If you ever want to sleep in the same bed together, like we used to, I would be for it." Taylor looked at her, one eyebrow cocked. "What do you mean? Like, sex?" "No," Scout said quickly. "I just mean a body next to you. You and Gina were together for years, and now you're sleeping alone in the other room. That just saddens me. I can't imagine what that's like. I know Jaren can't sleep alone, or so he says. He says he misses being in a relationship, or some shit like that." Taylor sighed. "I don't need that, but thanks." She turned back to the game. Scout could tell she offended her, but she didn't know how. If anything, Scout should have been the one offended. When they first met, when they fooled around constantly, Scout had thought they were working toward something serious. Then, one day, Taylor texted her and asked if they could just be friends. If that wasn't enough, Taylor then told her she was a rebound. Scout wanted to bring that up now, to save face, but she decided to keep her mouth shut. "I like being friends," she told Taylor. "I like being friends with you too, Scout." Scout's phone vibrated. She read a text from Jaren. "I have to go," she quickly told Taylor. Chapter 19. Scout didn't know what was going on when she got back to her apartment, but she figured it wasn't good. The front door was actually locked this time. When she got inside, she found her roommate wasn't alone. The first person she saw was Jaren, sitting on the couch. Directly across from him was Duke, setting up a dry erase board. "What's happening?" she asked. Jaren pointed to Duke, who didn't seem to notice her presence. When Duke looked at her, he said, "I want to figure out who this jerk-off is." "Why all of a sudden? And what the hell happened to your face?" "It's not sudden," he replied quickly, scratching the 3 bandages on his face. "And I fell down the stairs at my house." How many times? Jaren asked with a laugh. I watched a movie where the characters wrote down all the suspects and tried to figure out the who and why. I figured it would be fun if we did it too. Okay. Scout sat next to Jaren, who smiled at her. Where were you? He asked her. Taylor's. You two friends again? I think so. She and Gina broke up. Sweet. Now you can swoop in there. Hello, Duke called. Scout and Jaren gave him their full attention. Duke continued. Who are all the people who know about the movie? Scout went first. Gina, Taylor, you, me, Jaren, Amanda, Seth. A few guys in Call of Honor, Jaren said. The diner owner. Duke wrote down all the names, except for the video game guys. Do your online buddies know your real name? He asked Jaren. I don't think so. Oh shit, Scout said suddenly. Ricky and her brother know about a movie. They don't know what it's about. Duke's eyes went wide at the news. What's Ricky's brother's name? Raymond, I think. He wrote down both names. Now, what are some reasons for why anyone would want the movie stopped? Common decency, Jaren said with a smirk. Fuck you. Duke wrote down common decency. Revenge? Scout offered. Revenge is so overused. Duke wrote it anyway. In the movies, Scout said, the killer is usually someone close to the main character. Who's the main character? Duke asked. Me, Scout and Jaren said at the same time. Screw you, bitch, Jaren said with a laugh. I was the first one attacked. But I'm the girl, so I'm the heroine. No one cares about guys in horror movies. That was so sexist. What makes you guys think I'm not the main character? Duke asked. Scout and Jaren looked at him. I'm the director, I mean. I'm the most important person in this room. Scout rolled her eyes. Don't roll your eyes at me, Duke said with more heat than she felt necessary. I'm sorry. I'm just stressed out. I really want to finish this movie for the festival, but I don't want anyone else getting hurt over it. We're so close to finishing. Scout shrugged, accepting the apology. You're still making it? Jaren asked. Of course. Why wouldn't I? I thought, with this meeting, that you were having second thoughts. Hell no. We're filming the scene where Nikki and Sam go to the movies before Sam is killed. Oh, and I need you guys to get as many of your friends together to act as the crowd. The manager will let us film in Auditorium 7 after the theater closes. Jaren scoffed. That's like a lot more people that will know about the movie. So, whoever's attacking us already knows about the movie. Plus, I'm saving that scene for the day before the finale shoot. It'll just take 10 minutes to shoot, most likely. Jaren stared at him. Duke didn't notice at first, but Scout did. What's wrong? She asked him. Duke looked at him as well. I just can't believe you're still making this shit, even after I was nearly beaten to death. I played along, hoping you'd come to your senses eventually, but you only care about yourself. Jaren shouted that last word, got up, and went to his room around the corner. Scout flinched when he slammed the door. What the fuck is wrong with him? Duke asked her quietly. He said you remind him of his dad. The murderer? It's not about that. His dad used to bully him and beat him up when he was a kid. Oh. That seemed to be news to Duke. He feels like you don't care about him, she went on, that you're willing to put his life in danger for selfish reasons. He waved his hands around. He's free to leave. But you know he won't. You're his best friend, and he doesn't want to let you down. Duke stood there, his hands on his hips, staring at the board. Without looking back at Scout, he asked, Are you sure Ricky and her brother don't know what the movie's about? I'm not certain. Why? I don't know. I can't think of anyone else who would truly want this movie put in development hell. If Raymond found out about the movie, he would likely want to protect his sister any way he could, right? Scout remembered what Ricky had said about her brother, that he was a great support system. Scout told Duke this. Now we're getting somewhere, he said, his eyes alight. What now? I don't know. We'll have to be extra careful for the rest of this week. Once the movie's done, everything should go back to normal. You really think so? Scout asked. Duke shrugged. I hope so. By the way, can I sleep here tonight? I don't feel like going home. Chapter 20. Duke spent the next 2 days filming with Seth and Amanda at some secret location even Scout didn't know. The fact he'd slept on the couch for 2 nights spoke volumes about how he felt about the person trying to harm his movie. Duke was obviously scared, but not scared enough to quit. Scout actually admired that. She joined Jaren on the couch, where he once again played Call of Honor. Are you going to act as an extra for the theater scene? He asked without looking at her. No, I'm working tonight, and I still want nothing to do with that movie. Good. What do you mean? She asked. He hesitated. I'm just glad you're sticking to your principles. You have more brains than him. I thought you said you weren't making the movie anymore, that familiar voice from the game asked. Scout laughed. Shut up, dude, Jaren said into his microphone. Why are you still making it? Didn't you get your ass beat because of it? The boy sounded more forceful than Scout felt necessary. In fact, he sounded downright pissed. Jaren and Scout looked at each other. She grabbed the headset from him and spoke into the microphone. What's it to you, fella? She covered the microphone and said quietly to Jaren, What's his gamer tag? Fella, the gamer mocked. Are you his grandmother? Jaren pulled up the gamer tag. Frags to riches. Yes, I'm his grandmother, Scout said absently, handing the headset back to her roommate. Pull up his profile, she whispered to Jaren. He did. The profile was mostly blank, but it did list his location. Haltom City, Texas. Whoever he was close. Ricky's brother, she whispered. We don't know that, Jaren whispered back. Scout grabbed her car keys and left the apartment, making sure to lock it. When she got to her car, she called Ricky, asking if she could come over. Ricky said sure and gave her directions to her house. Scout got lucky. If Ricky hadn't been home, Scout would have talked casually, at some point bringing up her brother. She would have asked if he played video games, and if so, what was his gamer tag? Scout was no detective, and subtlety wasn't her strong suit. But if it got her the information she needed... She parked in the street, by the mailbox. The neighborhood was quite nice, though she felt bad about being there. She didn't even live in the house, and yet she felt uncomfortable about going inside after what happened to Sean. Ricky met her at the door with a smile and a hug. Scout couldn't help but notice her perfume, some sort of vanilla scent. She almost didn't want to break the hug, but willingly let go when Ricky invited her inside. Scout's eyes immediately went to the living room on the left. Raymond was sitting on the couch, playing a familiar video game. He slowly turned his head and looked at her. Ray, Ricky said, quit being creepy and say hello. Hello. Hi, Scout greeted, waving quickly. He usually plays in his room, Ricky explained, but he broke his TV. I didn't break it, it just stopped working. It was an old piece of shit. Whatever. To Scout, she said, Do you want something to drink? Water? Tea? Sure, tea's fine. Ricky nodded and headed to the kitchen. Scout put her hands in her pockets and walked closer to the couch. Raymond was in some kind of online deathmatch with other potentially hormonal teenagers like himself. She sat down next to him and stared. He slowly looked at her again. "What you playin'?" she asked. "Call of Honor. Ever hear of it?" "I think so." She stared at the TV, looking for his gamer tag. There were so many words and images on the screen, she didn't even know where to look. Ricky returned and sat on the recliner next to the couch. Scout took her tea and drank slowly. "So," Ricky said, "what's up?" "Oh, I just wanted to tell you about Taylor and me," Scout lied quickly. "She and I are friends again." "That's great." "And the even better part is that she and her girlfriend broke up." "Scout!" Ricky laughed. "You're terrible. You're not going to make a move, are you?" "No, Taylor and I are better as friends." "You're a lesbian?" Raymond asked. "Yes." "That's hot." "Shut up, Ray," Ricky said. "I was just talking to your brother about this game," Scout went on. "I have the same game system. What's your gamer tag? Maybe we can play sometime." "I doubt we play the same games," Raymond replied, eyes still on the TV. "You'd be surprised. I love fighting games, and I see you have some on the shelf over there." He laughed. "All right, you seem cool. My gamer tag is Frags to Riches." Chapter 21. While getting ready for work, Scout told Jaren that Raymond was the one who took such an interest in the movie. Jaren almost seemed disinterested at first, until she reminded him that Raymond was, quite possibly, the one who beat him up in his car. "That little shit!" he suddenly yelled, touching his nose. "He's little, isn't he? I'm gonna mess him up." "Calm down. We don't have any proof. But this is something. It can't be a coincidence that the guy who took such an interest in the movie just happens to be the brother of the victim about whom the movie is based." "Talk much?" Jaren teased. "I'm trying not to end sentences with prepositions. It's bad grammar." "That's nice," Jaren replied, eating cold pizza he'd taken from the refrigerator. "What do we do now?" "I have to go to work, so I don't have time to call Duke. Could you do it? Tell him what we found out?" "Okay." Scout had been applying makeup in the bathroom, with the door closest to the kitchen being wide open. The door was still broken from when the intruder, possibly Raymond, kicked it in, but Scout told herself she would get it fixed. It felt weird, having a strong hunch of who the masked attacker was. In the movies, no one ever knew who it was until the finale. Was tonight the finale? No, this was real life, not a movie. She knew that, just like she knew she wasn't the main character. No one was. As Scout headed out the door and down the stairs, she hoped she was right about Raymond being the masked mystery man. It would make everything so much easier. She arrived at work 5 minutes later. She loved living so close to her job, and took over the doorman stand. Since it was Thursday night, she would have to put the new movie listings on the marquee. She usually didn't mind, but there were 5 new movies opening the next day, and some of those movies had long titles. It would take her forever. During the last showtimes, a couple walked up to her and handed her their tickets. Scout tried not to gasp when she saw Raymond and Ricky. Ricky smiled and said hello. Scout said hello back. Raymond simply stared at her in a way that didn't make her feel comfortable. Scout reminded herself to call Duke as soon as she could. There was a wall-mounted phone directly next to the stand, but she couldn't make personal calls while working. Duke would be there in an hour or two to set up anyway, once the movie in Auditorium 7 dropped. Tonight was turning into a nightmare. Ricky and her brother were in Auditorium 8, and their movie ended after 7's. Though it seemed unlikely, Scout didn't want her walking in and seeing a scene being filmed that recreated the night her boyfriend died. Scout figured she'd still be at the doorman stand and could make sure Ricky never went anywhere near the auditorium. Perhaps Duke would be finished with the scene. It couldn't possibly take that long to film. He showed up a little after 11 when Scout was locking the front door. He had 5 extras with him, as well as Seth and Amanda. "Hey there," Seth greeted Scout. She faked vomiting and walked up to Duke, leaving Amanda to laugh at Seth. Scout told Duke that the real Ricky was in the auditorium next to the one in which they would be filming, and to be careful. She then took the ticket stubs up to the office and started getting the letters ready for the marquee. There was only one manager tonight, and he was in the safe room, counting money. Jaron showed up as she was walking down the stairs. "Need help?" he asked. She handed him the letters as she carried a long stick with a suction cup on the end. They went outside and crossed the parking lot to the marquee. Cars sped past on the service road. It was a cool July night, soon to be August. Scout couldn't wait for fall. Her favorite holiday was Halloween, though she didn't like dressing up. It wasn't because she thought it hokey or childish. It was simply because she could never decide on a costume in the first place. For the past 4 years, she dressed as the serial killer from her favorite horror movie. She figured it was time to retire it and try something new. But what? Well, nothing with a zombie mask, that was for sure. "What did Duke say?" she asked Jaron as she started taking down one of the movie titles with the stick. "He has this crazy idea of luring Raymond to his house and catching him in the act." Scout paused. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "That's what I said, but it makes a weird kind of sense. If we have no evidence that it's Raymond, then we can't exactly go to the police. But if we let it slip that we're filming the finale at Duke's house, and Raymond shows up in costume..." Scout nodded. "I guess that makes sense. Plus, the masked person, whoever it is, hasn't killed anyone. So there's a good chance no one will get hurt. If Raymond shows up, we call the police. My nose presses charges, and we can finish the film. That's all she wrote." "That's all who wrote?" Jaron sighed. "It's an expression, bitch." They laughed. After Scout got all the outgoing movie titles down, Jaron gathered them up and took them inside. Scout was alone, by the service road, and the freeway just past that. She felt like she was being watched. She looked around the thinning parking lot, but saw no one. After quickly placing the last movie on the marquee, she jogged back to the entrance. She'd left one door unlocked. As soon as she got inside, she quickly relocked the door. Chapter 22. As soon as Auditorium 7 became available, Duke and Jaron ran in and began setting up. The 5 extras and 2 actors sat in the center, as close together as possible to make it look crowded. "Okay, people," Duke shouted up at his actors. "Though this scene is short, we're going to film it multiple times at different angles." "You should get more cameras," a male extra shouted down to them. "And you're fired," Duke teased. Everyone laughed, including Scout. She leaned against the left wall, watching Jaron set up the cameras in the front row. "Hey, you," someone greeted next to her. Scout stood up and started stammering. Ricky and her brother walked up to her. "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" "We heard yelling, so we figured we'd see what was going on. I wanted to say goodbye before I..." Ricky looked up at the little crowd in the center of the auditorium. "What's this?" "My friends are filming a scene for their movie." Duke and Jaron were looking at them. Ricky noticed them as well. "You," she said to Jaron. "I saw you talking with Sean that night, with all the ushers." Scout looked at him. "What is she talking about?" He clearly didn't know what to say. "Were you friends with Sean?" Ricky asked him. "I knew him, yeah." "What?" Duke asked, incredulous. "Why didn't you tell us you knew him?" Ricky spared him from answering when she said, "What is this?" She swept her hand across the auditorium at Amanda. "Are you making a movie about me?" "Technically," Amanda called down, "I'm playing Nikki. Also, it's great to meet the real you. You're so beautiful." "Shut the hell up," Raymond yelled at her. Amanda went pale. "Hey now," Duke said, clearly trying to regain order. "She didn't mean any harm. I'm the director. If you want to yell at someone, yell at me." "I'm going to do more than that," Raymond said as he quickly walked toward him. "Stop," Ricky said, grabbing her brother's arm. "That's enough." He stopped and stared at her, his eyes wide and his breathing heavy. "They're exploiting you, or something." "And you already knew that," Duke said to him. "Isn't that why you attacked Jaron in his car?" Raymond whipped around. "What?" "You've been trying to stop us from making this movie for weeks, haven't you? Isn't that why you broke into my house and threw bricks at me? Tried to drown me in my own laundry chute?" Raymond's eyes went really wide at that. "What the fuck are you talking about?" "Let's go, Raymond," Ricky said, tugging on his arm. "I'm so sorry," Scout said as they passed her. "Do me a favor," Ricky replied. "Lose my number." A few minutes after they left, Duke regained control of the situation. He filmed the scene from multiple angles, and it only took 30 minutes. After that, the actors and extras left. Duke and Jaron stood with Scout at the doorman stand, discussing what happened earlier. "Raymond seemed surprised when you mentioned the bricks and drowning," Scout told Duke. "Why didn't you tell us about that?" "Because I figured it would be the last straw for the movie, that Jaron would truly back out." "I would have, yes," Jaron agreed. "There you go." Duke threw up his hands. "But it doesn't matter. We only have the finale to shoot now." Jaron pinched the bridge of his nose, shook his head, and walked away. "Where are you going?" Duke asked him. Jaron walked out of one of the side exits on the far end of the theater, taking his camera with him. "What did I do now?" he asked Scout. "You were nearly killed and you're still making the movie, that's what. You're being reckless." "It's my life. I can risk it if I want." Scout rolled her eyes. "Seriously, though, I'm starting to think Raymond isn't the one doing this." "Why?" "Like I said, he seemed truly shocked when you mentioned your attempted murder. It was like he had no idea what you were talking about. He seemed as shocked as everyone else." "Then who could it be?" Duke asked, frustration in his voice. "I don't know. But if you still plan on trapping him, we'll find out tonight." Duke looked at his watch. "Damn, it's past midnight. I guess it technically is tonight, huh? You want to crash at our place again?" "Hell yeah." Scout laughed as she gave him her apartment key. "Don't fall asleep before I get there. I don't want to be locked out of my own place." "Deal." He left out the front door, and Scout followed to make sure it closed completely. She checked the other doors in the lobby as well to make sure they were all closed. All the movies were over, and everyone should have been gone by now. The parking lot appeared empty. Her car was in the rear lot, behind the theater. As she got to the farthest door, close to the arcade, someone slammed on it. Scout screamed and backed away. She was only slightly relieved when she saw who it was. She opened the door and said, "Gina, what are you doing here?" "I'm here because of Taylor," she replied, stepping into the lobby. Her eyes were red and wet, like she'd been crying. "I heard about the breakup," Scout said. "I'm sorry. We broke up because of you, you know." "What?" Scout hadn't known that, and that simple truth was apparent in her voice. "I know you two fooled around before she and I got together. I can tell you two still have feelings for each other." Scout shook her head as she walked back to the stand. That's not even remotely true. We're just friends. So, you two didn't hook up before she and I got together? Well, Gina clapped her hands. That's what I fucking thought. That was 4 years ago. We've been nothing but friends ever since. So you didn't offer to sleep with her last weekend? Scout sighed. Did she tell you that? She said you offered to sleep in the same bed with her, but we both know that's bullshit. You figured you two would be in bed, and then you'd cuddle, maybe kiss lightly, and then things would go from there. Tell me I'm wrong. Scout wanted to tell her just that, but she wasn't completely off track. Though she loved Taylor as a friend, she often fantasized about lying next to her, the way they used to when they first met, watching adult cartoons while eating strawberry cake and drinking wine. That pause tells me everything, Gina said, bringing Scout back to reality. Fine, Scout said, angry. I miss being with her, but I don't want to be with her. She gets on my nerves with her silent treatments and tantrums. I know that you know what I'm talking about. Gina grinned. I do. I don't know how you feel about those, but I hate them. I could barely put up with them occasionally. I can't imagine putting up with them daily. She is a pain in the ass. Gina stared at Scout for a moment. So, you two are just friends? For now, Scout joked. One more silent treatment and I'm out. Gina laughed. Fine, I guess I believe you. She turned to leave when Scout said, Are you going to get back together with her? Maybe. Then, at least, living together won't be so awkward anymore. Scout chuckled as she escorted Gina to the doors. They found a surprise when they got there, though. All the doors were chained shut. Chapter 23. Scout and Gina checked all the lobby doors, but the handles were chained. They couldn't push them open enough to fit through. Scout grew nervous. In the years she worked here, she'd never seen the doors locked like this. Is this normal? Gina asked. Not at all. Let's go upstairs and talk to my manager. They jogged up the stairs, where Scout entered a code for the projection booth door. Gina followed her reluctantly, which Scout thought was cute. Mr. Anderson? Scout called, walking into the safe room. He turned to her. Yes? The doors in the lobby are chained up. Do you know about that? He stood up, a confused look on his wrinkled face. No. Did you see who did it? No, sir. He walked out of the office, down the hall between auditorium 6 and 7. Stay up here. I'll check it out. Scout nodded and closed the door. What's going on? Gina asked her. I have no idea. She headed toward the far end of the projection booth, which was very quiet since all the movies had ended. She opened the door to the emergency exit, which led to a small, dusty room with another exit door. It wasn't locked, but something was keeping it from opening. Something on the other side. What the fuck? She said quietly but angrily. She ran past Gina to the other end of the booth. That exit was also blocked. Are we trapped in here? Gina asked, clearly worried. Oh God, Scout said, mainly to herself. Only one person would do this. The zombie. Yes, I think we're trapped. Who is doing this? Someone who doesn't want us to finish the movie. I'm calling for help. Gina pulled out her cell phone and tried to dial out. I'm not getting a signal. Yeah, it's impossible to get one in this building. Do you have a landline? Scout ran into the office and grabbed a wall-mounted phone. There was no dial tone. She tried another phone on the desk by the door. She slammed the phone down and looked at the monitor tower in the corner of the office. She was given multiple views of the parking lot, lobby, and the long hallway downstairs that ran the length of the building. One of the lobby cameras showed Mr. Anderson walking up to the doors. He pushed on one, looking flabbergasted. Someone appeared from behind a standee near the arcade. Gina gasped. Scout couldn't move or speak. It was the zombie. The figure wore the familiar black hoodie and jeans, with a white mask that was barely visible in the small monitor. But Scout knew it was a zombie mask. The figure slowly crept toward Mr. Anderson as the manager continued checking the door. Scout looked around for a way to warn her boss. There was a code to use the phone as a PA system, but she couldn't remember it. She saw a walkie-talkie sitting on the desk. She grabbed it and yelled, "Mr. Anderson, behind you!" He looked down at the radio on his belt, then turned around. The zombie ran toward him. Mr. Anderson fell as the intruder punched him. Gina screamed. The zombie then looked up at the closest camera, right at Scout. Then he turned and ran out of the lobby, toward the stairs. "He's coming!" Scout said as she grabbed Gina's hand and pulled her down one end of the booth. Someone slammed against the booth door. Scout ran up to one of the projectors and started unscrewing the porthole window. "We're going to sneak into this auditorium and try that emergency exit." She pointed to the exit far below, just under the screen. "Try to do it quietly, okay?" Gina nodded as the door was assaulted again far away. Scout got all 4 screws undone and dropped the window to the floor. Then she helped Gina up and out. The last row was only a few feet off the ground, which often resulted in the patrons in that row blocking the projector's image on the screen. Scout used to hate the design of this theater, but she was thankful for it now. Gina slowly crawled through the small porthole, reaching for the seat tops with her feet. Scout had been paying too much attention to her and nearly missed a figure running up the stairs toward them. "Get back in!" Scout screamed, pulling the girl back into the booth. Gina screamed when she noticed the zombie running toward her. He grabbed her legs and started pulling her back into the auditorium. She kicked and screamed. The zombie yelled when she kicked him in the chest. He fell backward, tripping over the seats behind him. Scout pulled Gina all the way in and told her to run. "Where?" "Upstairs." She pointed to the steps that led to Projector 7. Since auditoriums 6 and 7 were the largest, the projectors had to be set up in higher areas. 7's was the only one that had access to the roof. When they got up to the theater's 3rd floor, Scout started up a thin, black set of steps and pushed on the roof door. She'd expected it to be locked as well and was relieved when it wasn't. When she and Gina got onto the roof, Scout slammed the door shut and looked around for something to block it. There was a barrel a few feet away. With Gina's help, they were able to roll it in front of the door. "Now what?" Gina asked. "We might get a signal from here." She checked her cell phone, but the battery was dead. Gina cursed. "I left mine downstairs in the projection area." "Shit!" Scout ran her fingers through her short hair and looked at all the businesses that surrounded them. "Help us!" she screamed. Gina joined her. They waved their arms at the few cars that drove by on the service road. All the parking lot lights had gone out, like they were supposed to. Scout could barely see Gina by the moonlight. The roof door thumped. Scout spun around and watched the door knock against the heavy barrel. After a few seconds, the man on the other side gave up. "What do we do now?" Gina asked. Scout ran to the rear of the building and looked down. She saw her car below, by the dumpster. "There's a pipe that some of my coworkers like to climb sometimes. I've never done it, but they make it look easy. We might be able to climb down." Gina looked down. "Oh God, that makes me dizzy." "Fear of heights?" "Fear of falling to my death." Scout gave her a sympathetic smile. "Want me to go first?" "It's okay. I can do it." She grabbed the pipe and began climbing down. The bricks that made up the theater jutted out enough to create firm footholds. Once she was down a few feet, Scout started down next. Then she heard something below. It sounded like a door slamming open. "Oh shit! Gina, climb back up!" Gina screamed as the zombie appeared below them, in front of the dumpster. He stared up at them. Then he ran up to the pipe and started climbing. Scout got to the roof and reached over for Gina's hand. Gina started to reach out when she suddenly lost her grip on the pipe. She screamed all the way down to the parking lot. Her scream ended abruptly when she struck the street. Scout stood there in horror, her hands covering her mouth. Gina lay very still, blood pooling around her. Her legs were bent at horrible angles. The zombie looked down at her and then back up at Scout. She stared at him, at his white, cracked face. Both looked down when Gina groaned. She was alive. Sweet Jesus, she was alive. "I can't move," Gina said. Her voice was filled with so much pain, and it broke Scout's heart. The zombie looked up at her again, and then climbed down to the lot. "Get away from her!" Scout screamed. "Help! Somebody call the police! Fire!" She suddenly remembered that the best way to get people to help was to yell, "Fire!" A fire concerned others more than rape or attack on an individual, as much as that sickened Scout. Her voice echoed off the trees across the street. The zombie walked around Gina, as if studying her. Then he pulled something out of his hoodie. It reflected the moon. It was a large knife. "No!" Scout screamed. "Kill me! I'm the one making the movie. Leave her alone. She's done nothing." The zombie looked up at her again, and then kneeled down to get closer to poor Gina. Then he raised the knife over his head. It struck Gina in the heart. Scout screamed as she watched the girl spasm for a moment, and then Gina went perfectly still. The zombie pulled the knife out, tossed it on the ground, looked up at Scout. And then he did something almost as unbelievable as killing a poor, paralyzed girl. He shrugged. Then he ran away. Chapter 24. Scout had managed to climb down and run to a fast food restaurant to call for help. She'd been crying and hysterical, so much so the employees could barely understand what she wanted. Officer Hightower showed up at the restaurant to pick her up. By the time they got to the theater, Gina's body had been covered with a sheet. Other officers were crowding into the narrow lot behind the building. Scout couldn't stop crying. Jaron and Duke showed up shortly after and consoled her. Once she was under control, she told Hightower everything that happened to her and Gina. She left out the part about filming the movie, and about Ricky and Raymond finding out about it. She didn't know why she did this, though. She couldn't stop staring at the bloody body. Hightower turned back to Scout. "Do you have any idea who did this?" "I think it was the guy who attacked me at my apartment. He was wearing the same costume." "And you never saw his real face?" Scout shook her head. "It has to be Raymond Nelson," Duke piped in. "Who?" Hightower asked. "He's the brother of Ricky Nelson. You know, the girl whose boyfriend was killed in front of her weeks ago." "Why would it be him?" "He got hostile with us earlier in the theater. He seemed like he wanted to beat me up. We think he also may be the one who attacked Jaron in his car outside the party supply store." Hightower wrote that down in his little notebook. "We'll talk to him. Why would he want to kill Gina Mathers?" "He wouldn't," Scout said quietly. The cop looked confused. "But you believe he's the one who attacked you?" Jaron sighed. "We're making a movie about his sister. We think he may have found out about it, and that's why he attacked me in my car. He, or someone, has been harassing us for weeks, telling us not to make the movie anymore." Hightower stared at him, his mouth wide open. You're making a movie about the murder of Ricky Nelson's boyfriend?
Yes, Duke said proudly. I thought it would be a great subject for an upcoming film festival.
The officer looked at Duke with what looked like disdain. You disgust me.
Excuse me?
I was there when the bodies were pulled from that house. It was a massacre. What gives you the right to profit off someone else's pain?
Duke was speechless. Scout saw Jaren smile at that.
Imagine, Officer Hightower went on, someone killed one of your loved ones, and someone else wanted to make a movie about it. How would you feel?
That would be awesome, Duke answered immediately. I'd want a ticket to the premiere. That doesn't justify the brother of the victim going around and killing others.
Have there been others?
Not that I know of, but Scout said this guy pulled a knife from his hoodie. He clearly had something planned tonight.
Hightower nodded. Scout was barely paying attention, though.
Can I go now, officer? She asked.
He looked at her. Yes, I'll speak with Mr. Nelson and get back to you. Meanwhile, I'll need you to come to the station.
Scout nodded. How's Mr. Anderson, my manager?
He's fine, just a bump on the head. I can't help but wonder why this guy didn't kill your manager when he had a chance.
Scout had wondered the same thing. Can someone call Taylor? She was Gina's ex. They still lived together before this.
I'll call, Hightower said. Chapter 25. Scout lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling once again. She was exhausted after everything that had happened, but she held her phone in her hand, waiting for Taylor to call or text. Despite how tired she was, she would drive all the way to Taylor's in a heartbeat if her friend needed her. Taylor had to have known by now what happened. The wait at the police station had been hell. Scout had fallen asleep several times in her chair while she waited for the police to release her. Hightower had brought Raymond in for questioning. Ricky and their parents accompanied him. All three had sworn up and down that Raymond was home all night, playing video games in the living room. A knock on Scout's door startled her.
Come in.
Jaren walked in. How are you doing?
Good.
I never really apologized for what I said at the bar, about you not really being, you know.
A lesbian?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was drunk and I didn't mean it.
Yes, you did.
He grinned. Well, I always wondered, but now I know for a fact you are. I'm sorry.
Apology accepted.
He sat next to her, on the edge of the bed. I never told you why my dad is in prison, did I?
You just said he killed someone.
Yeah, he killed my mom. Scout gasped and slowly sat up.
I'm so sorry.
Jaren shook his head. It's all right. He and Mom were fighting. It was a really bad one. He hit her, and I jumped on him, tried to beat him up. I was only 12, so I couldn't really do anything. All I knew was that I hated him at that moment. He threw me off and went for his gun. I honestly think he wanted to shoot me. He was that mad. I was standing in front of Mom when he aimed the gun, and...
Your mom pushed you out of the way?
Scout guessed. Tears formed in his eyes as he shook his head. I jumped out of the way. He was crying now. I jumped because I was scared, and now my mom is dead because of me. Scout scooted over to give him a hug.
I'm sure your mom wouldn't have had it any other way. She would have gladly given her life for you.
She held him as he shook from sobbing, and then she, too, started to cry for him. She didn't think she could possibly spare any more tears after the theater attack, but she was wrong. After a minute, they stopped and stared at each other. Finally, Jaren said, "Don't go to Duke's house tonight."
What? He's still doing that?
Now more than ever, he wants to catch the guy, now that someone is dead. He feels responsible. Duke's gonna get himself killed. He should let the police handle it. We can't call the police before the killer shows up. They would never go for it. Duke thinks he can handle it. Are you going to be there? Scout asked. I pretty much have to be. Duke can't handle anything by himself. Scout laughed. That's true. Don't worry, we'll be fine. But I don't want you to be there. Trust me, Scout said as she wiped away her tears. I'm not going anywhere near there. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. She read the text she'd been waiting for. Taylor needed her. Chapter 26. Scout and Taylor lay together on Taylor's bed. Scout held her as she cried. Why was she even there? Taylor asked. She wanted to talk to me about you, Scout replied. She thought there was something going on between us, but I told her there wasn't. She was relieved. Taylor looked up at her with red eyes. Who did this? I don't know, Scout said truthfully. She still wasn't sure if Raymond was involved. Her gut told her he wasn't. I still loved her, Taylor said. I loved her so much. I know, and she loved you too. I could tell. Scout continued holding her until Taylor fell asleep. She almost fell asleep as well as she watched the sun slowly rise outside Taylor's window through the closed blinds. Her computer monitor appeared in silhouette, bringing back memories of happier times. She wondered when Taylor would go back to her games, to her regular routines. She obviously loved Gina, but she couldn't afford this place by herself. She and Scout hadn't talked about what she would do now that Gina was gone. It was way too soon. Taylor didn't have any family in the state to take her in, and had lost quite a few friends over the years due to her attitude. Scout suddenly realized she was worrying about Taylor's future more than Taylor did. Taylor squirmed a little, probably having a bad dream. Scout held her more tightly and kissed her forehead. Taylor's eyes opened. What time is it? 6 a.m. Taylor looked at the blinds. Have you slept at all? No. She patted Scout's hip. Get some sleep. We can sleep all day. That truly sounded tempting. Her eyes even got heavier thinking about cuddling up all day, forgetting her troubles. Then the zombie's face appeared in her mind. Scout's eyes snapped open. She wasn't bound to forget that face, or the way the guy stood over Gina's paralyzed body, the knife going into her heart. Scout jumped up, startling Taylor. What's wrong? She asked Scout. I can't sleep. You saw her die, didn't you? Scout didn't know how to answer. She didn't want Taylor asking for details, didn't want her imagining her ex-girlfriend's death every time she looked at Scout. Gina was very brave, she finally replied. Who would do this? I don't know. Duke is going to lure him to his house and take him down, though. Taylor looked at her. Are you serious? Yep. Whoever's doing this has been harassing us for weeks. He attacked all 3 of us and somehow knows every time we work on the movie. Duke's hoping to use that against him. That's a cool idea. Are you going? Hell no. I'm tempted with staying in with you all day. Taylor stared at her for a moment, her eyes narrowed. Actually, I kinda want to go to Duke's house tonight. Scout felt like she'd been slapped. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? There will be a bunch of people there, right? Taylor, this guy killed someone you loved. Scout hated being so blunt, but it appeared to have an effect. This guy is dangerous. Taylor sat there, speechless. Her eyes grew teary once again, but she wiped at them with her hands and shook her head. I'm sure. I want to be there when this guy is caught. Scout sighed. Fine,
If you're going to be there, then so will I.
Chapter 27. Scout dreaded driving out to the middle of nowhere at night, so she decided to go in while the sun was still up. Taylor sat next to her, staring out at the surrounding woods, biting her nails. I really don't feel right about dragging you into this, Scout said. You could get hurt. Taylor looked at her. That's sweet. I can take care of myself, though. What if there's more than one bad guy? Like in your favorite horror movie? Then we'll handle it together. She grabbed Scout's hand and squeezed. It was reassuring, and managed to ease her fears a little. Scout drove down the familiar highway, and then turned right onto a long road. The houses along this road were so far apart, the occupants could barely be called neighbors. Scout cursed herself for breaking her rule about going to an isolated location with a killer on the loose. She felt for her cell phone in her pocket just to make sure it was still there. She found Duke's house on the left, along with 3 cars parked in the front yard. She recognized 2 of them. Looks like a party, Taylor said. I feel a lot better now. I don't. Scout turned off her car and got out. Why were there so many people here? She and Taylor walked onto the wraparound porch and knocked on the front door. Hey, Duke greeted, standing aside to let them in. You brought a guest? He asked Scout. I'm not the only one. She saw Seth and Amanda with scripts in their hands. What the fuck are they doing here? The shooting was supposed to be a ruse, remember? Duke shrugged. I figured we could get some shooting out of the way. It's the finale, after all. Jaren came from upstairs and stared at Taylor. What's she doing here? She wants to see the killer caught, Scout told him. To Seth and Amanda, she said, You guys shouldn't be here. Why? Amanda asked. What's going on? I thought we were shooting the final scenes. We are, Duke said. No, we're not, Scout added. We're trying to trick the killer here tonight so we can catch him and turn him into the police. Killer? Seth said, screwing up his face in confusion. What killer? Who died? My ex-girlfriend, Taylor said quietly. The guy who's been trying to ruin your movie for weeks killed her last night. Don't you watch the news? No, he replied. Oh, my God, Amanda said, swishing her neck with every word. The killer's coming here? Tonight? What the fuck? She grabbed her purse and headed for the front door. Seth was right behind her. Where are you going? Duke asked, following them. Scout looked out the open door, past the bug screen that acted as a window for the porch. The sun was setting. Duke came back inside and stared daggers at Taylor. We're better off, Jaren told him. They had no right to be here, and neither do you two. He directed that at Scout and Taylor. No right? Taylor asked. This fucker killed someone I loved. Did he kill someone you love? Jaren dropped his eyes to the floor. I'm not leaving until we catch him, she finished. Jaren nodded, looking at Duke. All right, Duke said, holding up his hands. I think we should establish some ground rules in order to avoid any shenanigans. First, no wandering around the house by yourself. If you disappear from the group, you're automatically the killer. Secondly, don't trust any dead bodies. Unless we see someone die, they're most likely the killer faking their death to avoid further suspicion. I've never trusted off-screen deaths, and I never will. And thirdly, if you don't have a fully charged cell phone, you can't be a part of this. Is everyone's cell phone charged? Taylor and Scout pulled theirs out and checked. Mine is halfway charged, Taylor said. Then you're out, Duke replied. Seriously? Of course not. You're good. Taylor grinned. Next up are weapons, Duke went on. I have a gun. There are knives in the kitchen. Jaren is using a baseball bat, so you girls can go for whatever you want. I highly suggest the knives. Come on. Scout tugged Taylor's sleeve toward the kitchen. Scout grabbed a butcher knife from the rack, and Taylor grabbed 2 steak knives from a drawer by the sink. Those tiny things? Scout asked. Taylor held the knives, blades down, and slashed into the air with one and then the other. It feels comfortable. Shenanigans, ladies, Duke called from the living room. Get your tushies back in here. They rejoined the group. Jaren was staring through a window that looked out onto the front yard and road. See anything? Duke asked him. Yeah, the killer's standing by your car. What? No, asshole. If I saw something, I would tell you. Taylor laughed. I like him. Scout nudged her shoulder and said in a sing-song voice, Taylor likes a douchebag. Hey, Jaren said as he grabbed his bat from behind a recliner. I'm not a douchebag. Focus, people, Duke said nervously. We're expecting a homicidal maniac. Dude, we're prepared, Scout said. Where's your weapon? Shit, it's upstairs. I'll get it. Duke headed for the stairs. Shenanigans, Taylor declared. Duke froze midway up. You're right. Come with me then. Jaren waved him off. We trust you. Just hurry. Duke ran upstairs and disappeared. Scout grew nervous for some reason. Duke's rules were good ones, and now he was violating the first one. Though she'd known him for years, she didn't trust him completely. I really think you guys should go, Jaren said to the girls. Why? Taylor asked. I just don't think you should be here. Whoever's doing this clearly has a grudge with Duke. He killed Gina, Taylor said. Maybe he didn't mean to. Scout couldn't believe what she was hearing. Are you defending him? Not at all. I'm just saying that if he wanted us dead, he would have done it a long time ago. Scout thought about it. He didn't kill Mr. Anderson, she said quietly. Who's Mr. Anderson? Taylor asked. My manager. He was there last night when Gina was killed. Scout nodded. Why kill her, but not a grown man? But he had a knife. Maybe he wanted to scare you, Jaren said to Scout. Well, it worked, she replied. Then why did he kill her? Taylor turned away, furiously wiping her eyes. Scout thought she knew why, but she didn't want to say in front of Taylor. The memory of Gina's paralyzed body lying in the parking lot came to her. Maybe the zombie thought he was doing her a favor by killing her. Duke suddenly ran downstairs into the kitchen, where he grabbed a knife. Then he ran in front of Taylor and Scout, pointing the knife at Jaren. You son of a bitch. What the fuck, Duke? Scout asked. Jaren's the killer. What are you talking about? My gun, he told her, is missing. Chapter 28. What do you mean, it's missing? Jaren asked, seemingly shocked. Don't give me that shit, Duke yelled. You were just up there, and now it's gone. And do you automatically assume it's me? You're goddamn right I do. Jaren dropped his bat. How long have we been friends? Don't you dare try to pull the guilt trip on me, bitch. It could easily be you who's been doing all this. No one saw you get attacked in that parking lot. You could have faked it. And you easily could have faked yours, Jaren shot back, or stolen that phone from the bar to call Scout. How do we even know the gun is really gone? All we have is your word. Scout watched the exchange, her heart racing. She'd never truly thought of her best friend as capable of harming anyone. She couldn't help but think it now.
As an impartial party, Taylor said, I think it's possible the killer is in this room. I agree, Duke said over his shoulder, and we're looking at him. I couldn't find you last night after you left the theater, Jaren. Where did you go? I went to a girl's house. She's one of my fuck buddies. What's her name? Jaren hesitated before saying, Megan. You hesitated. You're lying. I had to think, Jaren shouted. I know a lot of girls. I can't remember all their names. Scout knew that to be true. She'd seen the list he made years ago. Everybody calm down, she yelled. We're not going to get anywhere if we're at each other's throats. It's him, Duke said, sounding like an insane person. He's been on my ass about this movie almost from the start. That's true, Jaren, she said to her roommate. Tell us the truth. Are you the one doing all this? He opened his mouth, hesitating, when a phone suddenly rang. It was Scout's. Hello? Hello, Scout. She recognized that voice. Who is this? You know who this is. Duke stared at her while still brandishing the knife at Jaren. What's going on? It's the killer, she whispered to him. Speakerphone. She activated the speakerphone. Are you the killer? She asked. What do you think? Why? Taylor suddenly asked. Is that the girlfriend? Sorry, but your lover was paralyzed and I felt bad. I couldn't very well leave her like that. I offered her a kindness. Taylor was crying again, but she kept the sobs quiet. Scout admired her for that. What do you want? Jaren asked. I warned you about making this movie. I gave you so many chances to stop, but you ignored me. Now it's too late for all of you. Jaren looked out the closest window. Bullshit, Duke said to the phone. You're not really here. I'm surprised you can't see me, the voice said. I'm closer than you think, and looking right at you. Scout shivered. She looked all around her. She couldn't see out the windows because the living room light above washed everything out. I was going to just kill you, Duke, but now there's a whole house of witnesses. I guess I'll have to have a little fun. What's to stop us from leaving? He asked. It's 4 against 1. You're welcome to try. My knife has already tasted blood, and it wants more. A pause. Of course, you could sacrifice yourself, Duke. If you do, I promise to let everyone else live. How can we trust you? Jaren asked. Duke had dropped the knife, trusting his friend once again. I don't give a shit if you trust me, the voice said angrily. But I do know that if Duke doesn't come out, I'll come in. Hang up, Duke whispered to Scout. She did. Call the police, he said next. She dialed 911 and waited for it to ring. It didn't. Something's wrong with my phone. Duke, Taylor, and Jaren checked theirs. None of them would dial out. He's blocking our signal somehow, Jaren said. Is that possible? Taylor asked. I guess so. Jaren put his phone back in his pocket and picked up his bat. What do we do now? Don't you have a landline? Scout asked Duke. It's the 21st century. Hell no, I don't have a landline. Scout looked out the window. She saw 3 cars, hers, Jaren's, and Duke's. The moon shone on the road and the field beyond, and nothing else. No hooded figure, no figure of any kind. Whoever it is must have gotten in the house already, she said. He took your gun, Duke. We're no safer in here than out there. What are you suggesting? He asked. We head for my car and I drive us the hell out of here. Chapter 29. Duke went first, opening the front door slowly with his knife raised. Scout went next, with Taylor right behind her. Scout had her keys in one hand and her knife in the other. They stood on the wraparound porch, looking on either side to make sure no one ambushed them. Duke opened the porch door, jumped down on the ground, and then quickly looked around again, as if afraid the sound of his landing would alert the killer. Scout looked out at the gathering of cars in front of her. Hers was the farthest, but it was also the closest to the street. All she had to do was back up, making sure not to accidentally drive into the ditches on either side of the entrance to the yard. "Ready?" she asked her friends. They said they were. That was when Scout noticed someone was missing. "Where's Jaren?" Taylor and Duke also noticed he was gone. "Son of a bitch," Duke said. "I told you he's the killer." "Or something happened to him," Taylor offered. Scout was about to head back into the house when headlights shone on her, casting her shadow across the porch walls. She turned and saw a car pulling in and parking behind hers. A young woman got out and stood there, hands on hips. "I have a bone to pick with all of you," Ricky said. "And I can't wait to hear your thoughts," Duke said as he ran toward her car and jumped in the passenger seat. "But we have to get the fuck out of here." "We can't leave Jaren," Scout said as she jumped in the back seat with Taylor. "Fuck him. He should have stayed with us." "What's going on?" Ricky asked, getting back in her car. "The killer's here," Taylor replied. "He's right there." She pointed toward the house. Scout saw the hooded figure with the zombie mask running toward them with a knife over his head. Everyone screamed as he jumped on the car's hood. Ricky put the car in reverse and stomped on the pedal. The car went backward for a few seconds before the back end fell. The killer slammed into the windshield. Scout realized what had happened. Ricky had backed into a ditch. She put the car in first gear and tried to drive out, but they were too far in. The killer started beating on the windshield. Everyone except Taylor screamed. Scout looked at her friend and saw her head resting against the door. She'd slammed it against the window hard, cracking the glass. The killer jumped off the hood and ran up to Ricky's door, where he punched the window out with one hit. Glass shot into the car. Scout was right behind Ricky, and she got some of her blood on her when the killer stabbed her in the heart. Scout screamed. "Fuck!" Duke shouted as he got out of the car and ran away. The killer pulled the knife out of Ricky's chest just as Scout opened her door, slamming it into his chest. He fell backward as she ran toward the house. Scout jumped onto the porch and ran into the front door, which didn't open like she'd expected. It was locked. "Open the door, you son of a bitch!" Duke didn't. Scout turned around, but didn't see the killer by the car. She jumped off the porch again and hid next to Jaren's car, which was the farthest away from the house and closer to the woods. Then she just hid there, listening and waiting. She heard footsteps, but couldn't tell where they were coming from. She crawled under the car and saw the killer walk by, between Jaren's car and Duke's. He headed toward the house. Scout had been holding her breath the entire time. She waited a minute, but heard and saw nothing. Then she thought she heard more footsteps from farther away, but they were so light she may have imagined them. After another minute, Scout crawled out from under Jaren's car and walked toward Ricky's. She was dismayed to realize she'd lost her keys. She saw Taylor in the back seat, but Ricky was no longer in the front. The killer must have taken her body with him. Scout feared he would come back for Taylor. She had to get her friend out. When she opened the door, Taylor slumped out. Scout just managed to catch her before her head hit the ground. She pulled Taylor out and carried her onto the dirt road, heading the way she'd come to get to the house. The closest neighbor was half a mile away, according to Duke. Scout had no hope of carrying Taylor all the way there. She had to put her somewhere safe. She stepped into the woods next to her and hid Taylor as best as she could, and then she went back onto the road and ran like her ass was on fire.
Chapter 30. Duke walked throughout the living room, making sure every window and door was locked. He had no idea where anyone was, and he was freaking out. His plan had gone horribly wrong so quickly, and now all of his friends were probably dead. He didn't realize he was crying until he made a choking sob that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. When he got to the back porch door, he found it wide open. "Oh, Jesus," he whispered. He walked toward it slowly, not knowing if the killer was already inside the house. He hoped he wasn't, that the door had been open for a while. As he reached for it, he heard quick footsteps on the porch outside. He screamed when Jaren fell against the door, gasping, "Duke, thank God. What's happening?" Duke backed away. "Where have you been?" "I don't know. All I remember is us heading for the car, and then I saw this door open, and then, the next thing I knew, I was waking up outside. My head is killing me." He looked around. "Where is everybody?" "You damn well know where they are." Duke continued backing away. "Ricky's dead, and probably Scout and Taylor too." He held up his knife again and pointed it at Jaren. "You don't really think I'm going to fall for your bullshit story, do you?" Jaren took an uneasy step toward Duke. "How can I be the killer? He called us while I was standing right next to you." "You have a partner, of course. I just don't know who. It better be someone I've met, or that would be lame." "Why would I?" Jaren's eyes grew wide. "Behind you!" Duke quickly turned around and saw the killer standing in his living room, his knife raised. He ran toward them. Scout went from running to jogging and then started walking. She could barely breathe anymore. She felt a cramp in her stomach, the runner's stitch, and groaned. She didn't know how far away the neighbor's house was, but she knew she could make it if she just kept going. She started jogging again. Headlights shone from behind her. She turned and saw a car racing toward her. It was Jaren's car. Scout was tempted to keep running, but she knew she wouldn't get far before the car struck her. And she knew it would. The killer was behind the wheel. She headed into the woods just as the car struck the trees she'd just passed. She kept running, ignoring the branches that scratched her face. She heard a car door open and close. Footsteps crunched leaves and twigs on the ground. Scout didn't dare look behind her. She saw the killer's shadow before her as he ran in front of the car. "Help!" she screamed. And then she was tackled. The killer reached for her, trying to get a good grip. Scout grabbed a rock and hit him in the chest. He groaned and knocked it from her hand. And then he punched her, and it was lights out for Scout. Chapter 31. When Scout woke up, she found herself in a chair. Her arms were tied with rope, her hands tied behind the back of the chair. The first thing she saw was Duke tied to a chair directly in front of her, unconscious. The second thing she saw was Jaren tied to another chair next to them, also unconscious. They formed a triangle. The killer appeared from the kitchen, still holding his knife. He walked up to the trio, circling them. "Who are you?" she asked him. The sound of her voice woke Duke. He looked around, then noticed the figure behind him. "Oh, shit!" He struggled with his ropes but could barely move. He was tied tightly. Jaren woke up as well and looked at all of them. "The zombie didn't want us making the movie," he said. "No shit!" Duke yelled. To the killer, he said, "Just show us who you are already. This is getting old as fuck." Instead of complying, he went to Jaren's back, wrapped an arm around his chest, and raised the knife. "No!" Duke screamed. "Please don't. You don't have to kill us. We don't know who you are, and you've made your point. I'll destroy all the footage and never ever make a movie again. I promise." The zombie stared at him, still holding Jaren.
Then he started stabbing Jaren in the back very quickly. Duke and Scout screamed. After a moment, Scout realized the killer wasn't stabbing Jaren. He was cutting the ropes. "Not so fast," Jaren said, staring at him. "We're not finished yet." Duke stared back. "I fucking knew it." Jaren smiled as he stood up and threw the chair to the side. "So did I," Scout whispered. Jaren looked at her skeptically. "Oh yeah? How?" "It was what you said earlier about the killer stealing a phone from the bar to call me. Officer Hightower told me about that, but I never told you. So how could you know about that unless you were the one who did it? Also, I know it was you who chased me out of the apartment. After I ran into the locked corridor, you started to enter the code. Then you caught yourself." "How long have you known?" "I never really did. Those things just came to me." "Good." Jaren smiled. "Then I kept up appearances pretty well. I doubt anyone else will suspect me after tonight's over. Not that anybody's ever going to find your bodies." He looked at the masked figure next to him. "Do you know who this is?" Scout stared at him. "I have a feeling. If you guess correctly, I'll be sure you don't suffer." "How can you do this, Jaren? How can you kill people?" "I don't have to explain anything to you." "Oh, come on," Duke said. "Are you saying you're too good for the talking killer cliché? We're going to die no matter what. You might as well explain everything for a few minutes." Jaren gave him such a cold look that Duke actually gasped. "I did this because of you. After I was attacked, you still wanted to make your fucking movie. You bullied me into helping you make a movie I didn't even want to make. You remind me so much of my dad that it makes me sick." Duke stared for a moment, and then he laughed. "Are you fucking kidding me? You're doing this because you have daddy issues?" "Shut up, Duke," Scout said. "His dad killed his mom." "Actually," Jaren said, raising a finger, "I may have lied a little when I told you that story. My dad didn't kill my mom. I did." Scout looked at him, unable to speak. "The night mostly went the way I told you. My dad was attacking my mom, but he didn't go for his gun. I did. I tried to shoot him, but he jumped out of the way." Scout looked away, her stomach cramping again. This time, she felt nauseated. She looked at the masked figure again. "Take off your mask, Ricky." The figure stood there, not moving. Then he removed the mask slowly. Ricky Nelson stood there, smiling back. Chapter 32. "How did you know?" Ricky asked her. "Your disappearance from the car was a big clue," Scout said. "Also, I figured your brother wasn't the one who attacked my friends because he seemed really shocked when he heard what happened to them. But your brother and Jaren are online buddies, and I figured you had to have heard about the movie that way. You attacked Jaren in his car and either convinced him to help you stop the movie, or he found out later and offered to help." "It was the second," Jaren said. "I recognized her voice from the night she came looking for Sean. He and I once dated the same girl, the one who kicked in our apartment door, strangely enough. And I thought he was a good guy. I didn't want Duke making a movie about his death, and I felt bad for Ricky. I went to her with my plan to sabotage the movie." "Sorry about throwing all the attention on you at the theater," Ricky said to Jaren. "There was too much attention on my brother. He always gets caught up in his games, so I used him to find out about the movie. He barely understood what he was hearing. That's why I love him, and though he loves me, he would never hurt anybody." He shrugged. "No big deal." "Who killed Gina?" Scout asked angrily. Jaren looked to the floor. "I did. It wasn't planned. I was going to attack Duke that night, but I couldn't find him. You were the next best thing. I brought a knife, and I only meant to scare you with the threat of death. Then Gina fell off the pipe. I saw she was paralyzed, and I... You thought you were doing her a favor, Scout finished. And now you're going to kill Duke and me? I fucking told you not to come, Jaren snarled. And you brought a friend. Where is she, anyway? You'll never know. Scout grinned, taking pleasure in knowing her friend was hidden from these people. Are you disappointed, Duke? Jaren asked. The killer is someone you know, someone very close to you. Meh. Duke shrugged, as well as he could in the ropes. I'm guessing you used my prop knife and movie blood to fake Ricky's death in the car. Bravo. I tried to do this the bloodless way, Jaren went on. I knew Seth was still in the frame when we filmed at the diner. I was hoping you'd get so frustrated that you'd want to quit. Then you don't know me very well, Duke said. Obviously not. Even dropping bricks on you and trying to drown you in your laundry chute didn't change your mind. I'm impressed. Scout looked to Ricky. And you're okay with this? With killing people? Ricky narrowed her eyes. I killed Tony in my garage, and it felt amazing. I lost count of the number of times I drove him into the wall, and I used to love that man. Killing 2 strangers will mean nothing to me. And this is all because I made some stupid movie? Duke asked. You can't please everyone, I suppose. Jaren looked at Ricky. You can kill them both. I'll wait outside. He started toward the front door. Your father went to prison for you, Scout said suddenly. Jaren stopped in his tracks. Did the cops assume it was him? Jaren looked over his shoulder. He took the blame for me. And all those letters you get from him? He keeps apologizing to me, telling me it wasn't my fault. He says he'll do anything for me. Do you forgive him? What's it to you? Do you forgive him? Scout asked again. I haven't decided yet. Maybe. If you can possibly forgive your dad for everything he's done to you, can't you forgive Duke for making a movie despite the fact your life was put in danger because of it? Are you really going to let this heifer kill your friends? Heifer? Ricky said. She slapped Scout. I really liked you when we first met, Scout said. But if I'd known how crazy you are, I wouldn't have bothered talking to you. I'm gonna kill you first. Ricky raised the knife over her head, preparing to strike. Suddenly, she was tackled from the side by Jaren. They struggled over the knife. Scout struggled with the ropes, feeling them loosen. Jaren screamed as Ricky stabbed him in the stomach. Jaren! Scout screamed. Ricky pulled the knife out and got to her feet, wiping her mouth. She stared down at Jaren as he bled onto the floor. Her eyes were wide, her breath coming fast. Then she looked at Scout. You're in the same position I was that night, she told Scout. Only, the man across from me had been stabbed 20 times. She walked up to Duke. Tony stabbed Sean in the shoulder first. She did the same to Duke. He screamed. And then he wrapped an arm across Sean's chest and stabbed him in the stomach. She started to do the same when someone came through the front door. Freeze! A few police officers stood there, pointing guns at Ricky. Someone walked in behind them, staring at the scene. Taylor? Scout called. Her friend stood there, her buzz cut covered in dried blood. Her clothes were dirty from her nap in the woods. I guess I was far enough away from the cell phone scrambler to call the cops. Are you okay? I am now, Scout smiled. The cops handcuffed Ricky and called an ambulance for Jaren and Duke. Once Scout was untied, she hugged Taylor tightly. Keep an eye on him, Scout told the cops as she pointed at Jaren. He's the other killer. Got it, one of the officers replied. Jaren and Scout locked eyes for a moment. Then he smiled at her.
Chapter 33. Jaren and Ricky were in prison. Scout told the police about Jaren's father's false imprisonment, and they said they would do what they could. Though Scout had never met the man, she couldn't fathom him spending any more time in prison for a killing he didn't commit. Duke was true to his word as he destroyed all the footage he had for the movie. Though he vowed never to make recent events into a movie again, he didn't swear off filmmaking altogether. Scout was proud of him and offered her services whenever he needed them. She managed to get all of Jaren's stuff out of the apartment so Taylor could move in. Months later, Scout still couldn't believe Jaren had killed 2 people. She'd known him for 4 years, had lived with him. She thought she knew him. All she could think was that his father had messed him up so much, mentally, that he had just snapped. Eventually, she would get over these events. Eventually. After a few months of living together, both Scout and Taylor met special people and occasionally double-dated. They'd discovered long ago they were better off as friends. Scout wouldn't have wanted it any other way. This has been True Fans, Scout Galley, Book 1, written and read by Jerry Hart.